CNN International, this is World News with Veronica Pedrosa from CNN Center.
Hello and welcome. Coming up on World News, the time has arrived for a risky spacewalk, but there may be a hitch aboard the Russian space station Mir. Thanks for joining us. The crew aboard the station has been preparing to embark on a very important and potentially dangerous repair mission, but there's a late development. CNN's resident space authority, John Holloman, joins us now with the latest. John, are we on schedule?
Not on schedule as far as I can tell, Veronica. We're getting our information from several sources, none of which is the CNN Center. Let's go first to Russian Mission Control, where CNN's Moscow Bureau Chief Jill Doherty is standing by. Jill, there are a lot of things that can go wrong when you try to do a spacewalk. What is happening now, and what has happened over the past few minutes?
Well, in just the past few minutes, let's say about maybe 20 minutes, what happened was there was a problem. What the problem was, it was evening out the pressure between the rest of Mir and the transfer module. They have to depressurize that transfer module. And apparently what happened was that was not going smoothly. They had to isolate the problem, and what they found was there was leakage coming from the, through the hatch from the crystal module into the transfer module. It turns out that there was actually a valve that was not in a closed position. So what we are told is they have now closed that valve. Things seem to be going now smoothly, but we do hear, at least from one Russian space official, that that could mean a little bit of a delay in the actual spacewalk itself. But the most important thing is that they found that, that leak and plugged it and now seem to be back on track. John?
All right, Joe, that's good news that they found the leak. It's bad news that in their preparations they didn't realize that the valve was open, allowing some of Mir's precious air supply to leak out. This is a pretty complex maneuver. As the day goes on, I guess they'll be doing their best to make sure the air pressure, all the air in this transfer module, which is basically a big room with a bunch of doors in it where all the different pieces of Mir are put together. They'll get the air out of there, and then that will allow them to open the door to the Spectre module. Do the cosmonauts sound concerned? I mean, when you hear them talking to the ground, are they calm, or are they upset at all as they're going through this next phase of the walk?
They didn't sound upset, John. It was basically trying to figure out exactly what was going on. Everything here, as you might expect, they're pros, so things are pretty smooth, although the room did become pretty quiet at that moment to find out what exactly was going on. We have been talking to some officials, and what happens next, if everything goes according to plan, is they will then when the actual spacewalk begins, they take off the old hatch. They're going to videotape the interior of the Spectre, and then Vinogradov, who is the engineer, will then climb in feet first, go into the Spectre module. And we're also told, by the way, John, that they are using a kind of older version of the Orlan suit. It's ones that they had aboard, but they're slightly smaller. They have a tighter fit, and the reason for that is because they have to get into that comparatively small opening, or at least one cosmonaut does, into that small opening into the Spectre module.
Well, that's going to help them, Jill. We've got pictures of the hatch that goes into the Spectre module. We were just showing our viewers around the world on television, and you can see from those pictures just how tiny the hatch is. Literally, it's about the width of my hands here. It's not a very big hole, and the old Orlan suit doesn't pump up to be as huge as the new one does. So the fact that they're using the old suit is probably going to make this a little bit more helpful. It sounds to me at this moment like things are progressing then after this early delay pretty close to the plan. The Moscow mission controllers told us yesterday they expected the walk to take about 4 hours and 15 minutes, which would have it continue for about another 4 hours and 12 minutes. But because of this early startup problem, perhaps it's going to be extended a little bit beyond that.
Well, John, you know, they have 7 hours of oxygen inside those suits. So they have a good 3 extra hours that they could work in. So the main thing is, it would seem at this point that they've got enough, even with this delay, if there is a delay. And then if they don't finish it up, they simply have to go back. They're going to make it up as they go along, because as you've been saying and as we've been reporting, no one really knows what is in that Spectre module. Could there be things floating around? You know, they have to wait till they open the door and see what's going on.
Right. Well, I'm sure all the eyes in the world are following our coverage on this because it is a dangerous thing. Some European newspapers, Veronica was telling me, have been reporting that this is the most dangerous spacewalk ever. My NASA colleagues, who I've been talking to for the past couple of days about this, say it should be a piece of cake. I mean, a spacewalk is a spacewalk, and these guys are extraordinarily well trained to do it. And it is interesting that the NASA officials that I talked to in Houston a couple days ago told me that the commander was going to actually be the one to go inside and do the walk, and because of a miscommunication probably between the Russian Space Agency and NASA, turns out it's the flight engineer who's going to be going in. But one thing that the NASA people point out, because Vinogradov, the flight engineer, is going in feet first, and his commander is going to be out there in this this docking node. They'll be face to face. The two helmets of the spacesuits will be touching for virtually the whole time of the spacewalk, and they'll be helping each other get those very important power connectors hooked up.
John, if I could break in for a second.
Please.
John, we now understand it could be approximately a 1-hour delay. That's what Russian space officials are telling us, so we'll confirm that, but it looks as if they are getting into a 1-hour delay here, so we'll see what happens.
All right, Jill Doherty, it's good that you're there and you speak such excellent Russian, so you can continue to jump in with us. Let you go back and gather more information. We'll tell our viewers around the world that we're going to show you with a full-scale, real-life model of the Mir space station just how all this is going. NASA astronaut Norm Thagard will be joining us in a few minutes, Veronica. He is out in Wisconsin, where there is a full-scale, actually the original Mir module has been sold by the Russian government to an amusement park operator. We have taken over the amusement park for the day. Norm Thagard will go into the Mir module, show us precisely just how narrow these entranceways are, and will show us what sorts of things that the cosmonauts are facing and that astronaut Mike Foale is facing as he stands there in the rescue ship just to get ready to go.
Okay, just before you go, John, let me just ask you, where are Michael Foale, Vinogradov, and our commander actually on the Mir module right now?
All right, what's happening is in this docking node, Veronica, and I'm going to throw our director a big curveball here by showing you a little drawing that the Russian Space Agency has provided to CNN. I'll hold this up and see if we can get one of our cameras to zoom in on it. This is a picture of the main part of Mir. There is a little spherical area in here. This is where they are positioning themselves right now to do the spacewalk. The place where the leaking Spectre module is hooked onto this circle up here, which is this round door. So the two of them are in here. They'll be opening this hatch now that they've got the pressure equalized, and Vinogradov will be going up through that into the Spectre module. That's where he'll be doing the work. And as a result of that, it's going to be a very narrow passageway. It's going to be a difficult spacewalk from that perspective. But, and as Jill just reported to us, it's going to be delayed about an hour.
Right, and they'll be waiting and watching, as will we,
exactly,
to find out what happens in the next hour. Well, we will, of course, continue to keep you up to date on the Mir repair mission. And our coverage will continue just after a short break.
Veronica, the situation is this. We've got a drawing of the Mir space station to show you where the spacewalk is actually taking place. If you look at this is the entire space station. Sort of in the middle of your screen, there is a yellow module, and that's the docking node where all the different pieces of the Russian space station come together. Over on the right of your screen, the orange thing with the red pieces on it is the Spectre module itself. That's where the cosmonauts will go to do this spacewalk. But where they are now is in that little tiny central section. We're going to bring in the first American who ever lived on the Mir space station, who is standing next to that section in an earlier version of Mir, which is on the ground, Dr. Norm Thagard. Norm, good to see you. You're standing in front of that node right now, and our viewers might not have any perception unless you explain it to them as to just how small that space is where the two cosmonauts are now beginning to prepare for the walk. Why don't you show us around and just tell us, first of all, about the space that they have to work.
Okay, John, maybe the easy way to do it, since the module is behind me, is just to point out that this hatch, which is similar to the hatch that they'll have to go through to get into the Spectre module, is 800 millimeters in diameter, which is just a little bit less than a yard. And you can more or less see what its size is in relation to the diameter of that spherical node. And this spherical node is the airlock in which they're working this morning.
Right, and it's there are, as our viewers can see now from this this picture, there are doors all over the thing. About an hour ago, the cosmonauts thought they had sealed all the doors to all the other sections of the Mir space station, and they began to release the pressure from that that area where you are. I think I even see the pressure release on the other shot of it there, up sort of on the top of the thing. As they began to do that, they noticed that the air pressure was dropping in other parts of the Mir space station, and they found that a valve on one of the airlocks to one of the other sections had not been closed properly. They say they now have it closed, but because of this startup problem, they're going to delay the beginning of the spacewalk, the opening of the hatch into Spectre, by about an hour. Is that a showstopper in your opinion?
Not anymore. It would be a showstopper had they not been able to determine that it was simply a valve that's out of configuration. So they've simply closed the valve off, and there shouldn't be a problem at this point.
Yeah. As you've been listening to the word that we're getting from Mission Control in Moscow and Jill Doherty's reporting, are you pretty confident this is going to be able to work okay?
If the valve was the only problem, then they'll simply proceed as they were going to do before.
Yeah, I'm told that, that there is a camera. You all have installed a camera inside that node. If that's right, and we could see the picture from that camera, that would again give our viewers sort of the cosmonaut's eye view of what is going on there as the two cosmonauts get prepared. Norm, if we can get that picture up, why don't you and I talk about the role of Mike Foale in this? He is in the escape ship. He has moved from the front room of the escape ship, the Soyuz module, down to the back. So that's what it looks like inside that that node, and that's looking back into the old original part of the Mir space station. But again, you can just see from this picture just how small the workspace is. What's Mike Foale going to be doing during the spacewalk, Norm?
Well, if he's inside the Soyuz, he probably won't do much. Perhaps he'll be in communication both with the cosmonauts on board and the Mission Control Center in Moscow. But there's not much you can do inside the Soyuz.
Right, just get ready to leave if you have to. All right, Norm Thagard, we'll be checking back with you throughout this day. It's going to be a long day for all of us. Thank you for getting up so early in the United States, although it's midday in Europe and around the world, to be with us. Veronica, one more thing. If they can get this thing underway, if they can get those power cables reconnected, the Mir will have much closer to full power than it had, and they are hoping that they will be inside while the space station is flying over a lighted part of the Earth, and that light reflected from the Earth will reflect through the leak in Spectre so that they can see it and pinpoint it. Don't know if they'll be that lucky, but that's what they're hoping for.
Let's hope it does happen then.
All right.
Thanks very much, John. We'll see. A startup problem has delayed a planned repair mission aboard the Russian space station Mir. CNN's resident space authority, John Holloman, joins us for the latest developments. John.
Well, Veronica, things are going better than they were an hour ago when we last spoke. The spacewalk to fix Mir was expected to start an hour ago. As you said, it was delayed by a leak of air as the docking node was being depressurized. CNN's Moscow bureau chief is with us from Mission Control in Moscow. Jill Doherty, what's going on right now?
Well, John, they have found the leak, and they have apparently corrected it. It actually it was air coming from the hatch from the Kristall module to the transfer module, and we're told that the valve was not in a closed position, so there was a leak there. And the director of the flight, the Anatoly Solovyov, who's heading up this mission, himself had to get out of his spacesuit. They were already suited up and ready to go. He had to get out of his spacesuit to fix it. And so there has been a delay for about an hour. And that delay was not caused really by turning any valves or anything. It was really because of the time that it takes to get back into his suit. So everything is pushed back about another hour. And we do have a report. You know, this morning there was some controversy that reappeared yesterday and today over the funding for this program, and some saying that the Russian government was not providing enough funding. And we have a report from Betsy Aaron, report on President Yeltsin, saying that there is no doubt that there is a commitment on the part of the Russian government toward giving sufficient funding.
Russia's prestige in space is on the line. Can the cosmonauts repair the Mir, and in doing so, will they restore their country's well-deserved reputation as a leader in space exploration?
Россия не должна сдавать.
In a radio address to his nation, President Boris Yeltsin said aviation and space remain the pride of Russia. And he added there will be increased funding for space and aviation in next year's budget. Lately, we have become somewhat indifferent to space, he said. We have forgotten that space is not some propaganda show-off. Space is, first of all, hard work, dangerous, filled with pressure, with a maximum of responsibility. Commander Vasily Tsebliev, the cosmonaut in charge when Mir collided with the supply ship and when cables were mistakenly disconnected on board, has been criticized. Mistakes were made either in space or at mission control or both. But there is no criticism from the president now. People working in these professions, Mr. Yeltsin said, fully deserve their glory and medals for their hard and extremely important work. The time will come when young men will again dream of becoming pilots, and young women too. And in a truly Russian sentiment, he added, or marry a pilot or a cosmonaut. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Moscow.
So we understand now that they are depressurizing the transfer module, and presumably the pressure is now going down okay. So it looks like things are pretty much back to normal, about an hour delay. The astronauts, the cosmonauts are back in their suits, so things should be beginning. John, back to you.
All right, Jill Doherty. The cosmonauts have a checklist, sort of like airline pilots have when they are preparing to do a flight. And on this checklist, there are hundreds and hundreds of items. The cosmonauts are up to item number 144 right now, Veronica, on this long, long list. The opening of the Spectre module is pretty close to item number 200. So they're getting very close to the point when the people on the ground will tell them, okay, go ahead, open the door to Spectre, begin to look inside there. And that's a good sign that they're able to get this far along.
So it's been delayed for an hour, this repair mission. How much longer could it be delayed?
Well, the cosmonauts have 7 hours, roughly, of air in their spacesuits. They got into their spacesuits and started using that air 1 hour and 43 minutes ago. So if you subtract 1 hour, 43 minutes from 7 hours, you say they have about 5 hours and 15 minutes left. And so they can continue to be in there working on this for another 5 hours or so. It's not to a critical point yet by any means, but the clock is ticking. There's continuing concern, Veronica, over Mir's future. Some people want to desert it as soon as possible. But there is also some concern, some support for the station from the top people in Russia, which is an important factor. The spacewalk, as we told you, now expected to continue for another 4 hours. We'll keep you posted on that as it does. It'll continue at least until 10 o'clock in the morning, we are told. And if it is successful, more power inside Mir will be restored. It won't be 100% power because there is one of the solar panels out on Spectre that's damaged. Right now, the cosmonauts are talking to the ground. We have a translation into English of some of that conversation, which we are getting from NASA. Let's listen. This is live picture from Mission Control in Moscow, or near Moscow, in a Moscow suburb.
130 millimeters.
The cosmonauts are reporting the air pressure.
So the deep press is going rather intensely now. The pressure gauge will show the actual reading if you close the equalization valve. Otherwise, it's showing a wrong reading.
The air pressure where the cosmonauts are working is dropping rapidly now.
110 millimeters in the transfer node.
This is good. It's going down as it should. As soon as it reaches 0 or near 0, they'll be able to open the Spectre hatch.
This is about the right delta. for the decrease.
We have a drawing to show you of just sort of where everything is going on board Mir. The two cosmonauts are in the tiny yellow sphere in the center of your screen with all the big white pieces, which are the different Mir modules connected. Here's another view of the node, which is where the cosmonauts are. That funny-looking thing with three pigtails on it is the new repair part, the new hatch for the Spectre module. And that hatch will be inserted into the Spectre, which you saw there. This is what the Spectre module looked like before the accident. And if you look closely on the right side of your screen, just above and below the arrow, you will see those power cables from the solar panels, which were disconnected. Those cables are now in the center of your screen, back inside the Spectre module. The white thing that the arrow is pointing to is the Spectre hatch, and that's the airlock, which will be opened by the cosmonauts as they begin their spacewalk. The flight engineer, Pavel Vinogradov, will put his feet through that opening, and his head will be sticking out. If he were in there now, you'd be able to see him in his space helmet looking right at the camera. All right, we've just heard that the spacesuit pressure for the Orlan suits that the two cosmonauts are in has come into the correct range, which is a good sign. That means the cosmonauts are comfy inside, Veronica.
65 millimeters in the transfer node.
Again, the pressure dropping, dropping, dropping. I think 800 millimeters is the normal pressure, so that if it's down to 65, it's almost in a vacuum.
78.
The cosmonauts say the pressure gauge that they are looking at is showing a higher pressure than what the people on the ground who have the actual pressure gauges are able to monitor.
And they're measuring them millimeter by millimeter.
Exactly.
Once they get in, will we be able to see any pictures of this repair mission?
No, we won't, Veronica, and the reason we won't is twofold. One, Mir doesn't have enough power to do their television transmitter to the ground. The other is everybody's awfully busy. There's nobody left to hold the TV camera so that we can see the pictures. And because of that, CNN has taken an astronaut, moved him to a location in the United States where this same equipment is located, another version of the Russian Mir space station. And as the day continues, we'll be taking our viewers live there and letting them see what it looks like in the Mir, because we can't see live from the Mir what's going on.
All right, thank you very much. We're looking forward to that.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Q&A. Riz Khan is off. I'm Fanula Sweeney in London. If you've been watching, you know that it has been a very busy day in space. First, the Russian Mir repair mission was on, then delayed, then back on, and delayed again. Finally, as Russian officials listened in, the cosmonauts Pavel Vinogradov and Vladimir Solovyov entered the damaged Spectre module to get a look at what happened when it was struck by an unmanned spacecraft back in June. 4 hours later, the crew exited the module, saying that they had reconnected 11 power cables to restore power to the space station. Russia's ground control called the mission a success in spite of its rough start. And that is our focus today, the Mending Mir project, and as always, your questions and comments. Well, nobody knows Mir quite like Norm Thagard. As an American astronaut, he got the opportunity to spend time on Mir, studying the effects of prolonged space existence on the body. And in Atlanta, a familiar face, our own space expert, John Holloman. He's with us as well. First of all, Norm, let me ask you, would you have liked to have been up there today?
Fanula, I think it would have been an exciting time, although I would have rather been one of the participants rather than being in the Soyuz.
How would you assess the success of today's mission?
Seems to have been pretty successful, probably did even more maybe than they had thought they might do, but the important thing is they now have the plate in place which will allow them to get some electrical power off of those solar arrays.
John, let me ask you, how important was it that today's mission went well?
I think, Fanula, it would have, if they hadn't been able to succeed here today, no more Americans would have gone to Mir. The Russians might have had to consider shutting it down and coming home. And we don't know totally how successful it is yet because we don't know how much electricity is going to come out of there. But the Mir space station could not continue to exist and do anything other than exist without more electrical power. And that's what this spacewalk was designed to do.
Okay, let's first of all go to our emails, and we have an email from here in the United Kingdom, and The question is, what criteria should be used to assess whether the cost of repairing Mir is worth it? I'd like to put that to you, Norm, first, please.
Well, first of all, who's paying the cost? And it's the Russians, so it's really not a problem for the Americans. The only question is, do the repairs get made or not?
Do you believe that Mir should continue, or do you think it's time for it to be shut down and for people to concentrate on building the new space station?
No, I think it's well worthwhile keeping Mir going until the new space station is ready for operation and to take crews.
Okay, let me ask John, what about the atmosphere that must have existed at Russian mission control today? From what I was able to see and our viewers were able to see, things must have been pretty tense down there.
I think when the spacesuit leak occurred on Vinogradov's spacesuit, the first time they depressurized the docking node, tension must have gone up. What I was hearing, and I was hearing a translation, Norm is a fluent Russian speaker. He could tell us more about it because his Russian is so good. But at any rate, I heard the people on the spaceship saying, we got to repressurize this cabin right now. I can hear the air leaking out of the spacesuit. And the controllers on the ground were saying, well, let's wait a minute. Let's see, tell the guy to wiggle his arm a little bit and see if he can stop the leak that way. Which didn't make a lot of sense to me. But as moments went by, the commander of Mir said, nope, we're going to pump some air in here and we're going to keep this guy from dying, basically. Those weren't the exact words, but it sounded to me like that was the meaning. They filled it up with air again, discovered what the problem was, a leaking glove, replaced it. Luckily, they had a spare glove, or by good planning, they had a spare glove. And that was by far the most tense moment of this whole thing. After they got inside the Spectre and realized that Spectre was not a booby trap filled with deadly chemicals or deadly pieces of material, the atmosphere lightened up significantly, and they started telling jokes.
Okay, well, I'd like to talk maybe to Norm about that a little later on, but I understand we have a caller on the line from here in England. Rob, what is your question, please?
Yeah, good afternoon, Norm, and good afternoon, John. I wonder, for monitoring your the communications today, if you could tell me, do you understand that the power had been on in Spectre all the time since the collision in June? You spoke of pumps running and lights on, or did the power only come back on when the first of the cables were connected today?
I'm not sure. I'll go first, Norm, and you've lived there. You know how it works. My impression was that the power continued to stay on, although my first impression was that plugging in the cables perhaps got it to come on. But as I listened to what was going on, I mean, there's no reason for the power inside Spectre not to be on, because the solar panels were still connected to the batteries, and the batteries were still connected to some other instruments inside there. Norm, was that what you figured as well?
I think that's exactly correct. Those fans and other equipment that was running simply hadn't been turned off before they closed off the Spectre module when it developed the leak, so they've continued to operate all along.
All right, I'd like to take a fax query that we have now, and it's from Rosia Skert in Belgium, and the question is, what would be the scientific value of Mir if the Spectre module cannot be repaired, Norm?
When I was up there, which most of the time was without the Spectre module, it actually came up and was docked to the Mir station about 2/3 of the way through my mission. I did a lot of work. I had 28 experiments, none of which were dependent on the Spectre module. Really, the hit was because the experiments that were up there were designed with the Spectre in mind, and so if you're going to continue to be useful, then you need a new set of experiments.
And John, would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and I just wonder what sort of experiments those would be. Norm, your experiments, because I remember talking to you up there several times, were life science. You're an MD, you're a doc, and you were trying to figure out effects of weightlessness on human beings, and you did such a good job that a lot of the experiments now are not in that area. They're in, Mike Foale, for example, is growing plants to see something about reproduction in the absence of gravity, and he's doing a lot of other scientific experiments that don't involve the things that you were doing, Norm. What do you figure? More medical science experiments if you don't have the Spectre back?
That's right. You use equipment that doesn't require a lot of power. Obviously, it doesn't require much power to draw blood on one another. You just need a small freezer or two. So that sort of experiment.
Okay, let's go back to the phones now. We have a caller on the line from India, I believe. What is your question, please?
First of all, congratulations to the astronauts for what they did. The question is that if on the visual inspection from inside the Spectre, they cannot find where the leaks are, how do they go about finding the leaks from the outside? And once they actually identify the areas, how do they go about patching up these areas?
I'll start and let Norm, who has had the experience, go, Fanula, if that's okay. Vladimir Solovyev, the Mir flight controller, said in his news conference, which you saw here a little while ago, that he was convinced there were 7 places on the outside of Mir, most on Spectre, where this Progress resupply vehicle left dents or did damage. And so when the cosmonauts do their spacewalk, which is now scheduled for the 3rd of September, they'll be able to go to those places where the dents are and see if they can see inside Spectre on one of those places or maybe several of those spaces. Norm, is that fair?
I think that's fair. I don't really think they expected to find the leak today. It certainly would have been nice if they had, and it probably is going to come as a result of one of these external spacewalks.
And they can't fix it from the outside, right, Norm? I mean, they need to fix it from inside after they find it outside. Isn't that the way air pressure works?
Well, I don't know that that means they can't fix it from outside. I'm not sure what scheme they have determined they would use. When we practiced it for the space station, we used to practice repairing it from the inside. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, the Mir mending mission, that is the focus of this edition of Q&A. We have many more questions from you, the viewers, coming up. But in the meantime, we've got to take this short commercial break. At 11 years of age, has Mir outlived its purpose? Is the cost of maintenance, not to mention today's repair mission, worth the price? Mir's future is our focus. John Holloman has been covering the Mir repair mission all day for CNN. He is with us in Atlanta. And former Mir astronaut Norm Thagard joins us too. He is in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. Now, first of all, let's go to the phones, and we have James in Australia. James, what is your question, please?
Yes, my question's for Norm. With the problems experienced in the past with the Mir space station, potentially problems that may occur in the future, is there a chance that Mir may be abandoned? And if so, will that affect the timetable for the construction of the Freedom space station in next century?
The Mir station almost certainly will be abandoned after the International Space Station is underway. I don't see the Russians supporting 2 separate space station programs. But I think for right now, they'll try and keep it operating simply because it is a matter of national pride. And from the United States standpoint, we continue to get very valuable information from being a participant.
Well, this brings us nicely on to our next email question, and that is from Belgium, Antwerp, Belgium. Will they be able to use any part of Mir on the forthcoming International Space Station, John?
You know, I wish they could. Fanula, I've talked to NASA officials about this for years, and you got this Mir space station. Why not just build a new space station and attach it to Mir, which is already there? And I thought it was a great idea. There are a lot of technical reasons why you can't do that, and Mir would sort of bring down the overall effectiveness of the new station if you did it that way. And some of the equipment on board Mir might be removable, just like the cosmonauts today removed some of the American equipment from the Spectre module in big transfer bags and have moved it back to the main part of the space station. Probably when the next shuttle gets up there end of September, the stuff in those bags that can't be fixed on Mir will be brought back to Earth, and they'll try to repair it and get the information that's in it, and maybe someday some of that stuff will end up on the new station.
Norm, you mentioned earlier about how this is a matter of great national pride for the Russians. Now, I've been reading that a lot of Russians aren't really interested in too much in what is going on in space, and given the controversy that there has been about Mir over the last few months, do you think that the cosmonauts should be regarded as heroes?
Well, certainly the crew on board should be regarded as heroes, and Anatoly Solovyev, the commander who participated in the spacewalk today, has been a real trooper. He performed a spacewalk after my crew left that unfolded one of those solar batteries on the Spectre module. So they've had a lot of folks who've done some extremely good jobs up there.
Now, we often hear about NASA's achievements in space over the last 20 or 30 years, but maybe because whatever the Soviet system, we maybe haven't heard too much about the Russian space achievements. John, what kind of contribution do you think the Russians have made to space exploration?
Great question, Fanula. The space station, obviously the most visible, because any night, anywhere in the world, you can go outside and see it as it flies over. but they have done some planetary probes. They have done a great deal of exploration work in space. You know, the United States and the Russians were racing to get to the moon back before the U.S. landed first, and after the U.S. landed, the Russians had a big disaster with one of their rockets that was going to be their moon rocket, and it didn't get off the ground. So the U.S. sort of claimed the moon as its, but the Russians have done a great deal of effort, and one of the main things that they decided to focus on was long-term duration in space. And if you will notice, you go outside tonight and look up for the space station, you're only going to see one, and it's the Russian one, and it's been that way since the beginning of space exploration period.
We have another caller on the line. I believe this caller is from Japan. Hello, what's your question, please?
Yes, I'm Dr. Segal calling from Japan. My question is that, first of all, we must applaud Russia for whatever they have done in the past few weeks, few months. But the question is that what is America doing now regarding putting up a space station in the space?
You want to go first, Norm?
Okay, sure, John. The United States has the lead on the International Space Station program. The Russians are full partners with us, as are the member nations of the European Space Agency and the Canadian Space Agency. That station will begin construction next year, so hopefully in a couple of years we'll have a truly international space station in orbit.
Yeah, our callers in Japan, the Japanese have a Japanese experimental module that's also going to go to the station. And in fact, on the space shuttle that was up last week, they were testing a new robot arm built totally in Japan and was tested to make sure it could stay up in space and move things around on the outside of the Japanese module. This I have seen pieces of the new International Space Station. There is a missile factory, a rocket factory, about 100 miles from where I'm sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, in Huntsville, Alabama, where the first U.S. piece of the space station has been totally completed. It's virtually identical to the piece of the Russian Mir space station where Norm Thagard is sitting out in Wisconsin right now. Its purpose is certainly identical. It's where all the other pieces are come together to be connected. It's called Node 1. The Russians have completed the first piece of International Space Station hardware, which is called the Space Tug, and it will keep the thing in orbit for a while. The third piece is a Russian piece, which is a little bit behind schedule, but the Americans have another piece that will provide stability and guidance. So these pieces are coming together, and I have, as I say, I have touched some of the pieces, so I know they are there, and they will be launched into space starting this time next year, and from then until sometime around 2015 or maybe later, there will be this new space station in orbit.
Repairs aboard the troubled Spectre module on Mir got underway today, and nobody knows more about what is involved than our guests. John Holloman, I'm afraid, has to leave us now. Thanks very much, John. I know you're a very busy man today, but we will be talking to Norm Thagard when we return. Let us get back to our guest today, and it is former Mir astronaut Norm Thagard in Wisconsin. I want to go to the phones now, Norm, because I gather we have a caller on the line from Nigeria who has a question. What is your question, please?
Okay, my question is I would like to know why the scientific experiments on board Mir are not made public, since the space mission is intended to serve the interests of humanity. Thank you.
That's a good question, Norm. Why aren't some of the scientific projects made public?
The answer is easy. All of the experiments that are U.S. NASA-sponsored have to become public. That is a criteria, a requirement of the scientists that participate. They are required to publish their work in established scientific journals, which means they're basically open for everyone.
Okay, I have a fax here which has been sent into us, which I'd like to draw to your attention, and it is from Belgium, and it's really to do with today's repair mission. And the question is, isn't it possible to send up a new solar panel to Mir so that electrical power can be restored? And was today's mission really necessary?
You would have still had to perform the spacewalk because the panels are there. The Spectre module has adequate solar arrays on it. There's just no path for that electricity from the Spectre module to the rest of the space station. So that was the purpose of today's spacewalk, to reestablish communications with the power sources that are already there.
And let me ask you about Michael Foale, the U.S. astronaut. He wasn't actually taking part in the spacewalk. What was his function today during the repair mission?
It sounded like Mike was doing things similar to what I did when my crewmates did spacewalks and I was on board Mir. That is to keep track of the timeline, make sure that your colleagues, your spacewalking comrades, know when the upcoming events will occur. Just kind of keep them in tune with the timeline.
Well, I want to ask you, go back to Mike Foale, because you've been on Mir for several months. He seems like a pretty strong character, but he still hasn't come down. He's due to leave Mir later on next month. What kind of toll do you think all this has taken on him?
If you mean psychological toll, I suspect virtually none at all. The main thing he'll face is, like everyone else who is in space that long, he will have gotten a little weaker. His muscles would have wasted to some extent. He would have lost some blood red cells and some bone mineral, and he'll have a period of time that it takes him to get back in shape after he lands.
And how long does that period of time take, and how difficult is it just to readjust to everything, to being around people, to being able to breathe air, etc.?
Most of it, as a matter of fact, is pretty easy. It just happens whether you do anything or not. The major things are you're going to be real heavy when you first come back. Some people have some balance problems, but that goes away pretty quickly. One rule of thumb has been that it takes about 1 month of rehabilitation for every month you spent on space station. My own experience was it was about half that time.
Let me ask you, what do you think about Jim Lovell's assessment that Mir is useless? Do you think that Mir still has some function?
Oh, I think Mir still has a lot of function. I think the United States gets information that's valuable to us just from having our astronauts go up and spend that amount of time on the station, because we can always assess them physiologically before they fly and then again after they fly and get information that way. And the other thing to bear in mind is the United States is not financing the Mir space station to any great extent, so we're basically tagging along and piggybacking and getting information largely for free.
All right, there we have to leave it. Norm Thagard in Wisconsin, thank you very much for joining us, because we're out of time, and we had many more viewer questions that we were unable to get to, but as I say, we have some run out of time. But the conversation continues on the World Wide Web. Please check out CNN Interactive's website dedicated to Mir. There you'll find an active computer user billboard. The address is cnn.com/Mir. We want to thank all of you for participating in the program. It has been a good week. We'll be doing it again on Monday. Until then, our very best to you. Please stay with CNN International.
From CNN International, this is World News with Sonia Rusler in Washington.
Welcome to this edition of World News from Washington. Coming up on this show, mission accomplished. A hard day at the office for the crew of space station Mir. Again, high above the Earth, aboard the Russian space station Mir. A pair of cosmonauts have made vital repairs to the damaged spacecraft, reconnecting power cables to several of Mir's solar panels. The repair job was initially held up, though, by a faulty glove on one of the cosmonauts' spacesuits.
Is your excess pressure going up, Pavel? It's 0.3 now. Well, I moved my glove. It looks fine. No, hold on. This is something serious. Stand by. Let us think about it. Yes, I can feel that it's leaking. Then we have to stop it. We have to repress.
After fixing the glove problem, the cosmonauts spent several hours inside the damaged Spectre module, making repairs, retrieving science experiments, and looking for holes in the Spectre's hull. U.S. astronaut Michael Fall says that overall, Friday's mission went well.
I think this is a super day, and we carried out everything that we set out to do and more. And this was an excellent demonstration of how the spacesuit system is here on the space station Mir.
So what happens now? CNN's Betsy Aaron takes a look at how Friday's repairs may further prolong the life of a spacecraft that was only designed to last a few years.
It's the world's only orbiting space station, launched in 1986 on what the Russians call the highway to space.
Unique life conditions are provided in the working area of the base module.
At first, the space stations were spies in the skies, the eyes of the Soviet Union watching the West. But unmanned satellites watch the world now. Mir is concerned with the future.
We have an outpost for humans, something out there in the universe, and we can use it later as access to the moon, to Mars.
How long can a person live in space? The Russians hold the record 1.5 years. What effect does weightlessness have on work, on rest? What is the influence of gravity on growing crystals and life forms? What can be grown in outer space?
The whole Mir station is a priceless technological experiment for the future International Space Station.
But it's an experiment in trouble. An onboard fire, problems with oxygen supply, computers malfunctioning, men malfunctioning. There's little science going on now. The business of Mir is repair. Patch it up and fly. But why?
Space can and must serve humanity. Only from space can we monitor the state of the ozone layer surrounding Earth. Only space can be used as a dump for 10% of all the most poisonous and radioactive wastes and materials accumulated on Earth. Only from space can we predict earthquakes in the most precise way.
Until the International Space Station is flying, despite the questions of safety, Mir is the only show in town. Russia's determined to keep it up. The fight to save Mir is about prestige, about science, about the future. And the Russians are right when they say the only place to learn about space is in space. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Moscow.
Zunächst einmal war die Station nie außer Kontrolle geraten. Es war ein Teil davon, erstmal abgetrennt, nämlich Spektrommodul. Und Krikalev hat bereits gesagt, wir haben mehrere Jahre, also fast ein Jahrzehnt ohne dieses Spektrommodul leben müssen. Wir können auch weiterhin ohne dieses Modul auskommen. Aber es wäre natürlich günstiger, weil es ist das modernste Modul, wenn wir mit diesem Modul auch arbeiten können. Und deshalb sind einfach notwendige Schritte notwendig. Das heißt also zunächst einmal Austausch dieser Schleusentür, dass also die Kabelverbindungen wieder hergerichtet werden können, dass der Stromfluss vom Basismodul zu den Solarzellen des Spektrummoduls wiederhergestellt ist.
Jetzt mal weg von der Technik. Ich habe gelesen, dass Boris Jelzin sich in die ganze Diskussion um die Mir eingeklinkt hat. Er hat auch die Kosmonauten kritisiert. Das befremdet aufs Erste. Wie kommt ein Präsident dazu, sich so heftig in die Angelegenheiten einer Raumstation einzumischen?
Das befremdet auch mich, denn es ist mir unerklärlich, wie der Präsident Jelzin zum gegenwärtigen Zeitpunkt derartiges überhaupt sagen kann, denn die Schuldfrage ist bisher überhaupt nicht geklärt. Es läuft also nach der üblichen Masche ab. Jahrzehntelang hat man in Russland immer einen Sündenbock gesucht. Es sollte immer ein Mann oder eine Frau sein und dann kann man alles andere darauf abladen. Aber Gott sei Dank sieht es diesmal anders aus. Das heißt also, viele der Raumfahrtverantwortlichen haben sich bereits hinter die Kosmonauten gestellt und auch erklärt, dass man zunächst einmal alles aufklären muss, die ganze Geschichte. Und es wird wahrscheinlich nicht den Schuldigen geben, sondern es ist eine Reihe von Faktoren, die zu diesem Unglück geführt haben.
Erfolg. 2 Monate nach der Kollision mit einer Versorgungskapsel ist die russische Raumstation Mir wieder voll einsatzbereit. Erleichtert zeigten sich im Raumfahrtzentrum Kollision die Wissenschaftler der Mir-Mission. Nach anfänglichen technischen Schwierigkeiten gelang es den beiden Kosmonauten, in das beschädigte Spektremodul der Orbitalstation vorzudringen. Dort schloss der Bordingenieur alle 11 gekappten Stromkabel wieder an.
Nervosität, Angespanntheit bei den hohen Funktionären der russischen Raumfahrt. Kein Kommentar, denn gleich zu Beginn der Reparaturarbeiten auf der Mir hatte es erneut Probleme gegeben. Luft entwich aus dem Raumanzug von Kommandant Solovjow. Einer scheint von all der Hektik, all der Aufregung kaum berührt. Sergei Krikaljow, stellvertretender Flugleiter im Kontrollzentrum in Korolew. Konzentriert bis zum Äußersten, per Funk verbunden mit den beiden Kosmonauten, die auf der Station versuchen, bis zum Spektremodul vorzudringen. Nicht das kleinste Minenspiel verrät seine Anstrengung. Hier vom Kontrollzentrum aus führt und berät er die Kosmonauten, Krikaljow, Techniker und Psychologe in einem. Angst versucht er zu nehmen, als die Kosmonauten die Luke zu Spectre öffnen. Von außen ist das Modul zerstört, niemand weiß, wie es innen aussieht. Was geblieben ist von all den Apparaturen des amerikanischen Kosmonauten Foale. Schlaf hat Krikaljow wenig bekommen in den vergangenen Wochen, kaum mehr als die Kosmonauten an Bord der Station Mir. Dem dauernden Ansturm, dem Drängen der Presse gibt er schließlich doch nach. Nicht aus Eitelkeit, scheu sitzt er da, der 38-Jährige, und stellt seine eigene Leistung zurück hinter die der Kosmonauten. Wovon er spricht, weiß er genau, denn Krikaljow ist ein alter Hase in Raumfahrtdingen, ein Veteran. 3-mal war er bereits im All und schwierige, ja sogar kritische Situationen sind ihm nicht unbekannt. Rückblick, Mai 1991. Zum 2. Mal fliegt Kosmonaut Krikaljow zur Station Mir. Eine Mission, die in die Geschichte eingehen wird. Scherze an Bord mit Michail Gorbatschow, dem damaligen sowjetischen Präsidenten. Und während Krikaljow noch versonnen auf den Planeten Erde blickt, wird am Boden geputscht. Krikaljow wird im All vergessen. Nach Hause, nur noch nach Hause wolle er, funkt er verzweifelt. Als er dann endlich nach fast einem Jahr in der kasachischen Steppe aufschlägt, ist unter ihm ein Weltreich zerbrochen. Das Land, für das er einst gestartet war, gab es nicht mehr. Erleichtert ist er, nachdem die Reparatur auf der Mir heute geklappt hat, die Stromversorgung wieder gesichert ist. Krikaljow, keiner von den so großspurigen Funktionären der russischen Raumfahrt, ein neuer Typ, der durchaus einräumt, dass in den vergangenen Wochen die Station in sehr bedrohlichen Situationen war. Tage, wochenlang hat er im nahegelegenen Sternenstädtchen jeden Handgriff der heutigen Mission geübt. Unter Wasser, wo annähernd gleiche Bedingungen herrschen wie in der Schwerelosigkeit. Nur eine einzige falsche Bewegung, nur der kleinste Riss im Raumanzug wären lebensgefährlich gewesen in der Enge und Dunkelheit des Spektrmoduls. Krikaljows Arbeitsplatz, meist dunkel. Wenn nicht gerade die Weltpresse versammelt ist, gehen in der Bodenkontrollstation die Monitore aus. Geldmangel. Auch Krikaljows Gehalt wird seit Monaten nur unregelmäßig gezahlt. Der Lohn für das alles an Bord der künftigen internationalen Raumstation soll Krikaljow von russischer Seite als erster mit an Bord sein.
Als die Nachricht verbreitet wurde, dass die Kosmonauten die Stromkabel wieder verbunden hatten, da wusste Van den Berg das längst aus erster Hand. Alle 90 Minuten kommt die Mir vorbei, sichtbar auf seinem Computer.
Die Mir-Station ist jetzt im Bereich Den Haag. Was man hier sieht, das wird genannt Footprint. Das ist der Fußabdruck auf Erde von Mir aus gesehen. Das ist der amerikanische Astronaut. Er macht einen Witz über russische Sachen, welche in Russland gemacht sind und doch im Raum gut arbeiten.
Scherze und Flüche, Pannen und Erfolge. Für den Niederländer im anonymen Hochhaus gibt es nichts Spannenderes als die Ereignisse hoch über seinem Kopf.
Battered, bruised, and abandoned, but Spectre offers a welcome surprise.
After a string of setbacks, Mir cosmonauts find cable and success. Hello and welcome. The Spectre had them scared. Even engineers were imagining a cold, dark, dangerous place with jagged edges that could rip open a spacesuit and condemn a cosmonaut to death. A silent catacomb with bodily fluids burst from their containers, floating weightlessly. But for once, things aboard Mir turned out better than expected, and the beleaguered Russian space program had a chance to feel proud once again. Our coverage of the Spectre spacewalk begins with CNN's John Holloman.
The cosmonauts and astronaut Mike Foale are taking most of the weekend off now after a dramatic and scary spacewalk to fix the Mir space station's electrical problems. The spacewalk started on schedule but quickly fell 2 hours behind. The problem, a leak in the spacesuit of flight engineer Pavel Vinogradov. As soon as the docking node was sealed from the rest of Mir and the air was pumped out into space, he could feel the air rushing out of his suit. Commander Anatoly Soloviev immediately repressurized the node and replaced the old glove with a spare. After a tense half hour, the leak stopped and the spacewalk continued.
Nothing can scare us in this life until our technical support would allow us, we were able to move forward.
The main job, reconnecting 11 power cables from Mir's solar cells, was completed in just over an hour. Then the cosmonauts both climbed inside Spectre together and looked for the leak. They didn't find any, but they took pictures that'll be transmitted to the ground later. As the crew repressurized the airlock and got back to regular activities, Mike Foale gave his partners an attaboy.
I think this is a super day, and we carried out everything that we set out to do and more. And this was an excellent demonstration of how the spacesuit system is here on the space station Mir. Well done, everybody.
The future of the station requires at least one more spacewalk. These pictures helped ground managers know there are 7 dents in the side of Mir. Foale and one of the cosmonauts will go outside the Spectre and look closely in hopes of finding the leak that came close to costing the lives of Mir's crew. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
Joining us now is CNN's John Holloman. John, let me ask you first of all about the glove. Seems like an obvious problem to have a spacesuit leaking. Was there an obvious, clear response from the crew and the ground controllers?
It was very interesting to listen to, John. I'm not good in Russian, but people who translated this for me, said that the cosmonauts were expressing a great deal of concern, and it was responded to by the mission controllers on the ground with, well, take a little time and work on this. And then the cosmonauts who were losing air from their one of their spacesuits responded with, nope, we can't keep messing around here, we got to do something. And the ground continued to say, well, wiggle your arm, wiggle your hand, see if you can make the leak stop. And at that point, the commander of Mir said, nope, we're going to get some more air in here so this guy doesn't die. And that's what finally happened. But it was fascinating that the ground managers in their nice, comfortable chairs outside of Moscow were taking a sort of a more cavalier-sounding attitude about what was going on than the 2 guys out in jeopardy in the vacuum in spacesuits on Mir.
They got a new glove, they got back to work, they got inside of Spectre. What did they find inside there? What's it like to be in an abandoned space module?
Well, they found frost over a lot of the surfaces, sort of back from the docking port on Spectre. At first they said everything was going to be frozen inside there. Then they said because the Spectre was it had physical contact with the rest of Mir, even though there was a vacuum, they didn't think things would be totally frozen. They got inside and found a lot of frost, no icicles or anything, but a sort of an eerie atmosphere in there, in that there was no air inside, but there were fans that were still trying to blow some air, even though there was none present. And the lights were still on. The reason for those 2 things being all the electrical equipment in Spectre was still getting power from Spectre's solar panels. And even though there was no air and all that equipment is ruined, destroyed, the fans could still turn because the oil in the bearings hadn't worn out yet. And even though there was nothing for the fans to do and nothing for the refrigerators to cool anymore.
Now, while this was going on, this was, of course, the work of 2 very brave Russian cosmonauts. There's an American on board. Was he just waiting in the car?
He was. That's exactly what he was doing. Perfect choice of words. He was, Mike Foale was out in the Soyuz rescue ship. He started out in the front section, the front seat, and then he moved to the back seat to make room for the cosmonauts to rush into the front seat if they had to get out of there in a hurry. And there was some consideration, I think, during this leaky spacesuit episode when they said, well, maybe we should just get in the Soyuz and forget this. But decision was quickly made to stay, fight it out, and complete the spacewalk.
Now, in the course of the past few weeks, we have seen moods all over the map aboard Mir. There has been anger, there has been frustration, there has been fatigue, there has been fear. What was it like up there today?
Cool, calm, collected, professionalism. There's a total different atmosphere on board Mir now than there was 2 weeks ago. And I believe it's because of Soloviev, the commander. I mean, this guy who was brought up to Mir just a little over a week ago is the man with the right stuff in the Russian space program. He's been to Mir 5 times, been there more than anybody, has seen all the problems, has solved all the problems in the past, and he was in charge of this. Originally, he was going to be the person to go inside Spectre and reconnect the cables, and he decided to give his partner, who'd never been to the Mir before, a break, let him go in, start work on the cables. If he had problems, the boss would come along and bail him out. And as it turned out, Pavel Vinogradov did have a little trouble with some of the assignments inside the Spectre, so the boss went in and helped him out.
Now, I'm curious about what will happen to the Spectre now. Is there any hope that Mike Foale or anyone else will ever be able to go back in there to live?
I don't think to live. And the reason for that, John, is that you got to certify that Spectre is safe again. And how are you going to do that? When it was manufactured down here on Earth, they blew it up with air to the point that they couldn't put any more air inside there. They did everything they could to do pressure testing on that piece of the space station to make sure it would not leak. Well, now it is leaking, and they're going to patch the leak. They're going to stop what is in there from continuing to go out in space, but how are you going to pump it up with air again? I mean, there's a limited supply of air on Mir all the time. Because of the June 25th wreck in space, the air pressure on Mir, which is measured in millimeters, it's normally about 800 millimeters. It's down to 640 millimeters now, maybe even a little lower than that because they had to depressurize part of the space station for the spacewalk. I mean, do you really want to waste your air by shoving it in there? And I don't know that they do.
They were able to connect some crucial cables and attach the hatch that made it possible to route those cables back from the Spectre into the rest of the space station. So right now, are things back to normal on Mir?
Not normal, because, you know, 1/6 of the volume of the place is still inaccessible to human beings. Mike Foale still has to sleep, you know, he has to bunk in with somebody else because his bedroom is gone. Most of the United States experimental samples and equipment is still on board Spectre, but the cosmonauts did bring out bag after bag after bag of things that they found that they expected to find in various drawers and lockers inside the Spectre module. Mike Foale is going to have to forget about a lot of his science experiments he went up there to do, but he's probably resigned to that. He knew the Spectre module was never going to be a place where he could go and work again. Maybe they get it patched up. Maybe they get it patched up enough so that they can pressure test it and have the seal, when they find the place where the leak is located, will work. But the odds are, and people, senior officials in the American space program say, no way they're going to let another American risk his life by going to bed there every night.
Let me just ask you one last question. You alluded to Mike Foale's scientific experiments. He and the others aboard Mir have really been involved more in crisis control than in science. Is that over now, or is, for the next foreseeable future, the main job aboard Mir still going to be repairing and keeping the thing maintained?
Here's an interesting question, John. I assumed the science would be over. Earlier today on CNN International, Norm Thagard, the first American to live on Mir, pointed out to our viewers that when he went to Mir, he was there for 3 months with no Spectre module. He was doing a lot of life science medical experiments on himself and the cosmonauts, and he didn't have the Spectre. So when the Spectre got there, the Americans and the Russians were able to do a lot of different sorts of experiments. Now that Spectre's out of the picture again, maybe they go back to more medical experiments. How does your body change when you're up in space for a long time? They can't do a lot of the things they could do 3 months ago, but by the same token, they can still do a lot of things on that space station.
Fascinating day, John Holloman. As always, we're grateful for you to walk us through it. Thanks so much.
Sure.
When Insight returns, we'll look to the future of Mir, why people are spending so much time, energy, and money to keep it aloft. Stay with us.
Какие-то насосы. Какая-то прекрасная новость нам сообщает. Отлично. Ну, российская техника, она... Навигаторы, какие-то маршруты. Какая прекрасная новость нам сообщает. Отлично. Ну, российская техника, она и...
Welcome back. When people look up at clouds, they tend to see different things in the shapes above them in the sky. Further up, Mir is much the same way. It can seem like a damaged and dangerous piece of equipment that was designed to be abandoned years ago, or because of its unanticipated longevity, it can be seen as one more example of the extraordinary skill and success of the Russian space program. CNN's Betsy Aaron has a look now at both sides of Mir.
It's the world's only orbiting space station, launched in 1986 on what the Russians call the highway to space.
Unique life conditions are provided in the working area of the base module.
At first, the space stations were spies in the skies, the eyes of the Soviet Union watching the West. But unmanned satellites watch the world now. Mir is concerned with the future.
We have an outpost for humans, something out there in the universe, and we can use it later as access to the moon, to Mars.
How long can a person live in space? The Russians hold the record 1.5 years. What effect does weightlessness have on work, on rest? What is the influence of gravity on growing crystals and life forms? What can be grown in outer space?
The whole Mir station is a priceless technological experiment for the future International Space Station.
But it's an experiment in trouble. An onboard fire, problems with oxygen supply, computers malfunctioning, men malfunctioning. There's little science going on now. The business of Mir is repair. Patch it up and fly. But why?
Space can and must serve humanity. Only from space can we monitor the state of the ozone layer surrounding Earth. Only space can be used as a dump for 10% of all the most poisonous and radioactive wastes and materials accumulated on Earth. Only from space can we predict earthquakes in the most precise way.
Until the International Space Station is flying, despite the questions of safety, Mir is the only show in town. Russia's determined to keep it up. The fight to save Mir is about prestige, about science, about the future. And the Russians are right when they say the only place to learn about space is in space. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Moscow.
Joining us now to talk more about Mir is a man who has made it his business to study the Russian space program, Lon Raines, editor of Space News. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Let me ask you the half-empty, half-full question. Was this a signal success for the Russian space program or a stunt, a dangerous stunt that no one should have been asked to do?
Oh, I don't think it was a dangerous stunt at all. I think it was a good day at the Mir space station, and they haven't had a lot of those in the last 6 months, and they can sit back and enjoy a good success. Now, they've still got a ways to go.
Well, it was a successful day. Everyone likes to have a successful day. How badly did the Russian space program need to have this be a successful day?
Oh, I think that it was absolutely critical. They had to have this spacewalk go successfully, or I think it would have called the whole Mir program into question. We've already had the finance minister earlier this week questioning whether or not Mir should be abandoned next year in 1998, which I think is one of the reasons that Boris Yeltsin went on the radio today and tried to also buoy up the spirits of the people in the space program.
Financially and technically, how much pressure are they working under? How much money do they need that they don't have? And just at a logistical level, how many parts can they not get built because back home in Russia the factories have been shut down?
How many parts, I don't know. I don't think any of us know that. There were some comments from the last cosmonaut crew when they had their press conference on Saturday that many of the simple things that they've needed they can't get anymore. Certainly the hard currency that the Russians are getting out of the Mir space station program is very important to have that money coming in, because that buys a lot more than rubles does.
What about, we tend to concentrate on the cosmonauts and on the space station. What about the men and women back home in Star City and elsewhere, the manpower that makes all of this possible? How much pressure are they under?
they're under a tremendous amount of pressure, and I think it's a good thing to point out they've been under as much stress as the cosmonauts aboard Mir have been. I know from talking to some people in the Russian space program, they've been working 14, 16, 18 hours a day for the last 6 months since the fire, and especially since the collision with the Progress ship in June. And I think this was a good day for them and one that will help them relax a little.
Now, how long can they relax for? You just alluded to something I find intriguing. The finance minister is talking about cuts. The president goes on the radio to talk about full support. What's going to happen to the Russian space program after this?
Well, it's hard to say. One of the things they've got to do now is they've got to go ahead, continue the process of getting the power restored in Spectre, and then see how much of Mir's capabilities that were lost in the collision can be restored. Take a look at what is the value of being at Mir. Have you reached a point of diminishing returns? Can you still do good research? And the previous piece talked a lot about some of the important things that can only be done in space.
Beyond Mir, there is, as we heard Betsy Aaron mention, the prospect of the International Space Station. After all of this, the many setbacks and today's success, does the rest of the world still want to cooperate as fully as before with the Russians in space?
Well, certainly, I think all of the governments that are in the program remain committed. You've heard nothing but positive comments from people at NASA, and I think the Russians, Japanese, and Canadians are taking their lead from NASA. But NASA people have said, we are in this as partners. We're going to stand by our partners. We're not going to abandon them in this rough time. And certainly the Russians have to continue to perform. They've got to get their components of the International Space Station built on time, because the current goodwill has been in the face of a lot of adverse criticism from some members of Congress, and if the Russians continue to fall behind, that criticism will grow.
Let me ask you just one last question. On a day like today, despite everything we've set up till now, how much of it just depends on having really good people in that tin can floating around in space?
Well, I think it's everything, and one of the things that Boris Yeltsin mentioned is that these are the very best people in Russia, the cream of the crop. These, just as it is true in the United States, you get some of your most talented people interested in the space program, and that's one of the reasons they were successful.
Lon Raines of Space News, thanks so much for being with us. When Insight returns, all good things must come to an end. We'll tell you about the end of Mir in just a moment. Stay with us.
Какие-то маршруты. Какая прекрасная новость нам сообщает. Is that отлично? Ну, российская техника, она...
Welcome back. After such a good day in space, it almost seems ingracious to even mention it. But however hardworking, skillful, and brave the cosmonauts aboard Mir may be, someday the space station will have to be abandoned. Mir will lose its orbit, and parts of it will come tumbling towards Earth. Russia has plans for that day, and CNN's Ann Killen has a look.
The Russians want Mir to stay in orbit until the International Space Station is built, at least through the year 2002. Whether it lasts that long or a sudden crisis prompts the crew on board to abandon ship, it is inevitable that within months of abandonment, the space station will lose its orbit and crash toward Earth. Mir weighs 100 tons and is the size of a baseball diamond.
There are some large gas tanks, for instance, on Mir that would certainly survive re-entry and hit the ground. And a lot of other metal debris from the space station could also expect to survive re-entry and strike the ground.
Russia's plan is for a controlled re-entry to keep Mir debris from falling onto populated areas. The 7 modules that make up Mir would be broken apart. 2 of the modules have their own rockets built in. If they're working and have enough fuel, the Russians will steer them to a splashdown in the ocean. The rest of the modules would dock with unmanned spacecraft called Progresses, sent up to guide the modules to Earth. Progresses have ferried supplies for scientific experiments from Earth to Mir for years.
When we finish all the experiments and understand that we have completed the entire program, a couple of Progress spacecrafts need to be docked to the space station in order to divide it into parts and then to dump it into the ocean.
But sending and attaching progresses to Mir takes time.
I think you've got 6 months time after you evacuate Mir before you have to get it down.
That's assuming Mir isn't spinning out of control. If that happens, all bets are off. It would be difficult, say the experts, to attach rockets to the modules if the spacecraft was wobbling too much and there was no crew on board to help. An unguided entry to Earth brings back memories of Skylab, which is a little smaller than Mir, that almost crash-landed in Maine in 1979. Instead, it came down in an unpopulated area.
NASA was able to make a last-minute adjustment, but it's that had it land on the other side of the world in Australia, but there really was very little control.
The International Space Station, set to begin assembly next year, will be much larger than Mir. Its swan song is already planned.
We don't want to leave it to chance. What we're going to do is deliberately control where it goes down on the Earth.
While the International Space Station's demise is decades in the future, decisions about Mir will need to be made much sooner. Ann Kellen, CNN reporting.
A final note, while Mir is still alive and still aloft, the Mir crew that returned to Earth last week spent much of its time in space trying to keep Mir working. But in their spare time, crew members found the time to film a commercial for an Israeli company. The product they advertised was milk. The milk advertised was carefully processed so it would not require refrigeration and would be bacteria-free. The commercial cost almost $500,000 US to make. Some of it was paid to the Russian Space Agency. This is the second time Mir cosmonauts have filmed a commercial while at work in space. Last year, they made an ad for Pepsi. Thirsty work. That's Insight for this day. I'm Jonathan Mann. Thanks for joining us. The news continues in just a moment.
Wie die Kosmonauten, so sind auch die Mitarbeiter des Moskauer Raumfahrtzentrums schon seit der vergangenen Nacht auf den Beinen, um die riskante Reparatur vorzubereiten. Ursprünglich sollte Bordingenieur Pavel Winogradow allein in das Spektrommodul steigen. Überraschend hat ihn nun doch auch Kommandant Solovjow in das luftleere Modul begleitet, um die Schäden dort auf Video festzuhalten und zurückgelassenes Forschungsmaterial einzusammeln. Wegen eines undichten Handschuhs von Winogradow musste die Reparatur zunächst verschoben werden. Außerdem musste Kommandant Solovjow seinen Raumanzug plötzlich wieder ausziehen, um eine Luke zu reparieren, die nicht hermetisch dicht abgeschlossen hatte. Schaffen Sie es heute noch? Ich weiß nicht, antwortete am Nachmittag ein Mitarbeiter des Raumfahrtzentrums auf die Fragen der Journalisten. Doch dann wurde mit jeder Stunde die Stimmung unten auf der Erde besser. Um 15 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit war die Reparatur schließlich abgeschlossen. Die am 25. Juni abgekappten Stromkabel sind wieder mit dem Rest der Station verbunden. Weil die Reparatur später als geplant begonnen hatte, rief die Bodenstation die Kosmonauten zurück, ohne dass sie das beschädigte Modul eingehend untersuchen konnten.
Und Winogradow heute erste Reparaturerfolge erzielt. Es gelang ihnen, wichtige Kabel für die Stromversorgung an Bord der Station neu zu verlegen. Der Beginn der Arbeiten wurde allerdings wegen technischer Probleme um knapp 2 Stunden verzögert.
Die Sonnensegel der Mir waren bei dem Unfall am 25. Juni ebenso beschädigt worden wie das Spektrommodul. Die Aufgabe von Kommandant Anatoli Solovjow und Bordingenieur Pavel Winogradow, die den heutigen Einsatz zuvor in einem Tauchbecken trainiert hatten, bestand unter anderem darin, in dem Modul 11 Stromleitungen neu anzuschließen. Sie waren bei der Kollision abgerissen worden. Seitdem kann die Hauptbatterie nur 60% der benötigten Energie liefern. Aber nur wenn die Mir wieder über die volle Stromversorgung verfügt, hat die 11 Jahre alte Station eine Zukunft. Für die beschwerlichen Arbeiten mussten die Kosmonauten in engen Raumanzügen durch diesen Eingang in das leckgeschlagene luftleere Modul kriechen. Dort montierten sie auch eine neue Einstiegsluke. Der Beginn der Mission war zuvor durch Probleme mit einer Luftschleuse und einem Handschuh Winogradows verzögert worden. Dann aber lief alles glatt. Über Funk meldete der Bordingenieur dem Raumfahrtzentrum Koroljow bei Moskau, dass in dem Spectre-Modul ideale Ordnung herrsche. Nur einige weiße Kristalle flögen herum. Bei einem späteren Einsatz wollen die Kosmonauten dann die Löcher in dem Modul abdichten.
Finally, something went right aboard the trouble-plagued Mir space station. But for a time, it was touch and go. Just minutes before the two Russian cosmonauts were set to begin their repair spacewalk, there was an air leak into the transfer module. Once they corrected that, a leak was discovered in one of the cosmonauts' gloves, and the walk almost...
Thanks, Bernie, and we return to space. As we reported earlier, the two cosmonauts have helped put Mir back on a more even keel. We return to Jill Doherty's report.
Finally, something went right aboard the trouble-plagued Mir space station. But for a time, it was touch and go. Just minutes before the two Russian cosmonauts were set to begin their repair spacewalk, there was an air leak into the transfer module. Once they corrected that, a leak was discovered in one of the cosmonauts' gloves, and the walk almost had to be aborted.
Is your excess pressure going up, Pavel? It's 0.3 now. Well, I moved my glove. It looks fine. No, hold on. This is something serious. Stand by. Let us think about it. Yes, I can feel that it's leaking. Then we have to stop it. We have to repress.
Engineer Pavel Vinogradov entered the airless Spectre module, Commander Anatoly Solovyov right behind. There was concern the damaged module might be filled with broken glass or medical contaminants, but it was in relatively good shape. The crew completed its primary job, reconnecting the cables that were disconnected during an accident in June.
From the third try, we were able to open the hatch. We docked the electrical connectors, 9 main and 2 more, I would say, internal connectors.
As the Russian cosmonauts worked, Michael Foale, the U.S. astronaut, waited in the Soyuz escape vehicle. The Spectre module was where he worked and slept before the accident, and by radio he guided the spacewalkers through the module. They recovered documents, equipment, a vacuum cleaner, and even photos of Michael Foale's family. A relieved Foale gave the mission a thumbs up.
I think this is a super day, and we carried out everything that we set out to do and more. And this is an excellent demonstration of how the spacesuit system is here on the space station Mir.
The only downside, the crew could not pinpoint exactly where the Spectre was punctured during the accident in June.
We weren't sure whether or not they'd be able to detect where the damage occurred. Chances were 50-50 that they'd find exactly where the depressurization took place.
Finding that hole, we'll have to wait for another spacewalk, this one outside the Mir space station. It's currently scheduled for September 3rd. Michael Foale and Commander Anatoly Solovyov will carry it out. Jill Doherty, CNN, at Russian Mission Control, Koroljow, Russia.
In a national radio address, Mr. Yeltsin chided his countrymen for losing interest in the space program. The Russian leader acknowledged that earthly problems, such as economic and political troubles, may eclipse the intrigue of space. He also voiced appreciation for the problems the Mir crew has encountered, a shift from last week's tone when he said the mishaps could be blamed on what he called human error.
Us. A triumphant Mir crew is relaxing following what one of them calls a super day. The team successfully repaired the damaged Spectre module. But the repair mission, like the Mir itself, was not trouble-free. CNN's John Holloman explains.
The cosmonauts and astronaut Mike Foale are taking most of the weekend off now after a dramatic and scary spacewalk to fix the Mir space station's electrical problems. The spacewalk started on schedule but quickly fell 2 hours behind. The problem, a leak in the spacesuit of flight engineer Pavel Vinogradov. As soon as the docking node was sealed from the rest of Mir and the air was pumped out into space, he could feel the air rushing out of his suit. Commander Anatoly Soloviev immediately repressurized the node and replaced the old glove with a spare. After a tense half hour, the leak stopped and the spacewalk continued.
Nothing can scare us in this life until our technical support would allow us. We were able to move forward.
The main job, reconnecting 11 power cables from Mir's solar cells, was completed in just over an hour. Then the cosmonauts both climbed inside Spectre together and looked for the leak. They didn't find any, but they took pictures that'll be transmitted to the ground later. As the crew repressurized the airlock and got back to regular activities, Mike Foale gave his partners an attaboy.
I think this is a super day, and we carried out everything that we set out to do and more. And this was an excellent demonstration of how cool the spacesuit system is here on the space station Mir. Well done, everybody.
The future of the station requires at least one more spacewalk. These pictures help ground managers know there are 7 dents in the side of Mir. Foale and one of the cosmonauts will go outside the Spectre and look closely in hopes of finding the leak that came close to costing the lives of Mir's crew. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
Well, the success of the repair mission comes at a time when the Russian space program itself needs mending. President Boris Yeltsin offered relief, promising extra money to the aerospace industry.
Russia must not surrender the positions that it has won. It should not abandon its leading role. We should not forget that the condition of our aerospace complex in many ways determines the status of Russia as a great nation.
The once elite Russian space industry has fallen victim to post-communist budget cuts.
You have to know when to milk it. Mir's former commander and flight engineer returned to Earth last week with some commercial cargo. An ad they shot plugging Israeli milk. Israel's Channel 2 began airing the spot on Friday. More from CNN's Rod Huntress.
While the crew of Mir tested the limits of human achievement, far below, on planet Earth, new boundaries were being pushed as the old space station became an orbital set and a Russian spaceman became a pitchman. This is an ad for an Israeli brand of long-lasting milk, and the man doing the selling is Vasily Sibliev, the previous commander of Mir. The Tenuva Milk Company decided to milk his popularity when it needed to create a new image for its product, something to make the customer see it differently.
To accept milk as something that you can drink and enjoy from it, and not just put it on top of a coffee or a tea.
You can't help wondering whether this is quite what the founders of Russia's space program had in mind. But officials say they're so low on cash that they need to look at every option. And shoppers in Moscow don't seem to object.
Well, if they think the milk can help them, let them get on with it.
I'm sure that the milk is a great product, and all the technical problems on the station have nothing to do with the cosmonauts drinking milk.
This isn't the first time Mir and Madison Avenue have come together. Last year, the station helped promote a soft drink. This year, it's milk. One small step for man, one giant leap for marketing.
The crew of the space station Mir is taking the weekend off. That's after Friday's strenuous repair mission. 2 Soviet cosmonauts overcame leaks in a hatch and the glove of a spacesuit to reconnect power cables in the damaged Spectre module. On Monday, they plan to flip the switch that will allow power to flow from Spectre's solar panels once again. Russian officials say the power should be at about 90% of previous levels.
Nach den gestrigen erfolgreichen Reparaturen sollte die Mannschaft eigentlich einen Ruhetag einlegen. Doch dann kam es doch nicht dazu. Rainer Munz aus Moskau.
Am Vormittag liegt in Mir einem Freizeitpark. Die Kosmonauten trieben Sport und telefonierten mit ihren Frauen. Aber weil sonst nichts geboten wird, arbeiteten sie bereits am Nachmittag wieder an den Elektroverbindungen der Raumstation. Da blieb keine Zeit, der letzten Mir-Mannschaft nachzueifern, die Ende Juli einen Werbespot für eine israelische Milchmarke produzierte. Ausgerechnet, der damals schon seit 11 Tagen herzkranke Kommandant Vasily Sibliev mimte darin den Helden. Diese fröhlichen Bilder drehte der Bordingenieur gerade mal 4 Wochen, nachdem unter Siblievs Kommando der Raumtransporter Progress gegen die Mir gekracht war und beinahe die ganze Station zerstört hätte. Zur Reparatur der Mir hatte Zibliev keine Kraft mehr. Den Anweisungen des Regisseurs, der mit ihm vom russischen Raumfahrtkontrollzentrum aus verbunden war, konnte der Kosmonaut aber gut folgen. $450.000 kostete die Produktion. Wie viel die Milchfirma der russischen Raumfahrtagentur bezahlte, wurde nicht verraten. Auch nicht, ob die Kosmonauten ein Extra-Honorar erhielten.
Bei der Mir, wenn eine solche Beschädigung eintritt, was kann gemacht werden? Was lernt
wie bei
man
einem
jetzt
Haus, wie bei einem Auto, das Reparatur anfällig geworden ist. Man muss natürlich dabei erkennen, dass eine Raumstation anders ist als andere Raumprojekte bisher, dass es eine ständige Institution ist. Etwas, was immer da ist und was man auch im Stand halten muss, wo dann auch mal ein Leck entstehen kann und plötzlich tropft die Decke und das Dach muss repariert werden, wie bei einem normalen Haus. Das ist auch beim Bau der Station schon weitgehend mit einkalkuliert worden. Also viele Systeme an Bord der Mir sind reparaturfreundlich, andere sind es nicht. Da hat man Dinge in die Wände hineingelegt, wo also jetzt der Kosmonaut erstmal eine Wand aufbrechen muss, um überhaupt an ein Rohr ranzukommen. Oder manche Rohre sind schwer zu erreichen. Das sind dann die Lektionen, die wir lernen und die wir bei unserer internationalen Raumstation eben besser machen. Deswegen machen wir Amerikaner mit den Russen ja zusammen diese Mir-Shuttle-Phase. Da lernen wir solche Dinge, Schwachheiten in der Konstruktion. Wenn einer ein billiges Haus kauft, dann wird er mengenweise solche Dinge finden. Plötzlich steht Wasser im Keller oder so, die Heizung funktioniert nicht oder der Wasserhahn tropft. Das passiert in jedem menschlichen ständigen System und so auch bei einer Raumstation.
Ist das Prinzip der Mir, ja, ist ja ein Anbausystem. Ja. Ist das auch das, was Sie als Raumstation sich vorstellen?
Ursprünglich zur Zeit von Wernher von Braun noch sah man die Raumstation eher monolithisch, das heißt alles an einem großen Stück. Und bei von Braun sogar bestand sie aus einem Rad. Man nannte es sein Wohnrad im Weltraum, ein aufgeblasener Reifen. Er wollte sogar pneumatisch aufblasen und dann aus einem Material bauen, der dann starr wurde im Weltraum unter dem Ultraviolettlicht. Und an Bord hätten 60 oder mehr Menschen gelebt. Und es hätte sich langsam gedreht und dadurch Andruck erzeugt, sodass es an Bord keine Gewichtslosigkeit gegeben hätte. Das war nun ein Gedankenfehler, denn die Gewichtslosigkeit ist ja einer der Hauptgründe, warum wir überhaupt eine Weltraumstation bauen.
Nach der jüngsten Panne in der Raumstation Mir gibt es widersprüchliche Informationen über die Sauerstoffversorgung an Bord. Nach Angaben der US-Raumfahrtbehörde NASA sind alle Sauerstoffgeneratoren ausgefallen. Das Bodenkontrollzentrum in Moskau meldet dagegen, die Sauerstoffzufuhr sei wieder intakt. Gestern hatten sich die Kosmonauten um die Reparatur des Systems bemüht. Ob es wieder funktioniert, ist aber unklar. Die Mir befindet sich zurzeit im Funkschatten der Erde. Sowohl das russische Bodenkontrollzentrum als auch die NASA bestätigen, für die Besatzung bestehe keine akute Gefahr. Sie könnte sich mehrere Tage mit Sauerstoffvorräten versorgen.
In Russia will speak with the crew of the Mir space station. They hope to confirm that the crew has solved a mission-threatening problem with the air supply. CNN's Moscow bureau chief Jill Doherty has more on the latest efforts to salvage a future for the Mir.
U.S. space officials say it's a potentially serious problem. 2 oxygen-generating systems aboard the nearest space station not working. But Russian officials say one of those systems is working, and NASA may be operating on outdated information. Russian Mission Control acknowledges Mir's 2 oxygen systems were having trouble for the past few days. The main one, the Electron, located in the Quant module, was shut down before last Friday's spacewalk to preserve power. NASA also says there's been a problem with the backup oxygen-generating canisters, although Russian officials say the crew used 3 of them Monday. Mission Control says flight engineer Pavel Vinogradov was able to turn the Electron back on, and that, they claim, can provide enough oxygen for the crew of 3. With NASA and Mission Control in apparent contradiction, one Russian official says there may be confusion because U.S. astronaut Michael Foale briefed NASA by radio 3 hours before the mission commander, Anatoly Solovyov, reported the Electron had been fixed. Both U.S. and Russian officials say without the generators, the Mir only has enough oxygen to last several days. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
Dr. Thager, thanks for being with us this evening.
My pleasure, Brian.
Would you agree with that brief quote we saw from Dr. Richard Berenson that this is a disaster waiting to happen? I mean, did you, when you heard this news of the latest problem, did the expression, "here we go again," fly through your mind?
I was trained to use those cartridges, and the way you do it, you put them in a cylindrical holder on the wall and use a little firing pin mechanism. The Russians know that mechanism tends to be a bit bulky, so they tell you to try it 2 or 3 times, and if you have to, take the cartridge out and put it back in and reposition it. It's not likely that all 50 of those cartridges have malfunctioned, so it's just a simple matter of getting one started.
So, well, this is unfair because you distinguished yourself with how cool you were under fire up there, and you had your share of near disasters in space, but you are, to be dispassionate about it, pretty confident about what they face tonight.
Because I've seen it before. That mechanism, in fact, is so bulky that some of the cosmonauts actually had taken to lighting the cartridges with a hammer and nail and then putting it in the holder.
Now, that really shouldn't happen in space, should it?
Well, you wouldn't like it to happen, but again, it's a very simple mechanism, and maybe what they ought to do is just send up a new one that has a little bit more reliable firing pin on it.
How threadbare is this space station? I mean, you've heard the descriptions in the American media and the worldwide media that it's kind of like your uncle's old pickup truck orbiting in space, and it's held together with chewing gum and baling wire. How bad is it when you're up there?
It's not all that bad, and you got to remember that while some parts of it are 11 years old, other parts only came up there last year, so it ranges from the very new to the somewhat older.
Do you still believe in the American involvement in the Mir? Do you think it's time to cut and run?
I still don't think that there's a great danger to the crews, and I don't, again, because you have that lifeboat up there at all times. Even with the oxygen situation, they've got days before they'll have to abandon the station, and in the meantime, they can continue to work the problem.
I got a kick when Robert Hager said they were told to go to sleep tonight and worry about it tomorrow. Do you think they're really sleeping tonight?
Yeah, I really think they are sleeping. Again, these cartridges work fine, but sometimes the holder doesn't work so fine, and what we'll probably find out is when they wake up, they'll put another one in there and it'll light just fine.
To put this in automotive terms, it's got 300,000 miles on it. Do you spend the extra and keep it going, or should we put all our eggs into the next basket, that is the next generation space station?
This space station, the Mir, is not costing the Americans very much at all. It's a Russian space station. So right now, we're getting a pretty good deal. We're getting to send our folks up there and get several months at a time of experience at no great cost. And again, I don't think really much danger.
And so, so the good deal really does, when you call it a good deal, you're not terribly worried about the danger.
No, because I don't think there's anything on a space station that's going to kill you very fast. And again, you've got your lifeboat there, so if the situation on board gets untenable, you just get on the Soyuz and come home.
Dr. Norman Thagard from Tallahassee, Florida, tonight. Thank you very much.
Sure.
CNN's Moscow Bureau Chief Jill Doherty joins us now with details. Jill?
Well, Bettina, we just got off the telephone with Mission Control, and they tell us that just a few minutes ago they spoke to the cosmonauts, the crew on Mir, and that things are back to normal. They say that the 2 systems that yesterday were malfunctioning, not working for a time, are back and up and operating. That would be the main electron oxygen generating system and also the backup system of oxygen candles. Again, they say they did fail temporarily yesterday, but they now have been repaired. They're back up working, and they say things back on the Mir are back to normal. They also say that the cosmonauts will be going about their regular routine today, and one of those things is completing getting the electricity back to normal, and there is a continuing problem with the water and condensation. They're hoping that that will normalize itself too. But the most important thing they're saying is that the 2 systems of oxygen generating are back to normal, repaired by the crew.
Jill, there has been conflicting information that came earlier from NASA and from what the Russians were saying. Any explanation from that, about that?
Well, the only one, and this is not confirmed, but one official that we spoke to on the Russian side was saying that the possibility was The Americans, Michael Foale, who's the U.S. astronaut, had talked with NASA at one point when the system was actually down, and that information may have been taken, as the continuing situation, but it was a temporary situation. Meanwhile, 3 hours after that conversation, the commander had called up, they had a radio communication, and they had actually repaired it. So it may be just a matter of timing. Again, this is postulation by one official, but it may have been a matter of timing and talking to NASA. In any case, the mission control does say that things are back to normal and the two systems are working properly.
In case that these kind of problems continue, I think the world is wondering how long would it take those 3 men on board the Mir to get back to Earth? How difficult, how quickly, how easy is it for them to go back to Earth?
Well, they have their Soyuz space capsule ready at any moment to go back. It has its own system of oxygen. It's there for that precise purpose to take them out should something go wrong. So that's a fallback position that's always available to them, and they could get into that quite expeditiously. But at this point, it looks as if things will continue. The one thing that they do want to repair, there's another system that's an oxygen-generating system that's located in yet another module, and that one has been out of action for a while since the Mir collided with that Progress resupply ship. They'd like to get that up and running, too, so that's one thing they would like to repair. But at this point, they say that the system that they have functioning right now, the Electron oxygen generating system, is enough to keep things going, that they do have enough oxygen. And now that the backup system apparently is fixed, that's a very good insurance policy for them as well.
Thank you very much, Jill. CNN's Moscow Bureau Chief Jill Doherty updating us on the situation aboard Mir.
Nachts war es bereits, die Mir überflog gerade Amerika, als sich erneut Unheil über der Station zusammenbraute. Kein Sauerstoff mehr für die Besatzung, alle Versorgungssysteme zusammengebrochen. Von der NASA im fernen Texas kam die erneute Hiobsbotschaft. Im russischen Bodenkontrollzentrum gab man sich ahnungslos. Ein Tiefschlag für die russische Raumfahrt, nachdem gerade vor 4 Tagen die Reparaturarbeiten an der Mir erfolgreich begonnen hatten. Bis zum Morgen Unklarheit. Moskau wiegelt ab, Houston beharrt. Ein erneuter Zwischenfall auf der Mir. Das Eingeständnis im Laufe des Vormittags. Eine kleine Panne, ja, durch Überhitzung des Kühlwassers. Aber längst würden alle Bordsysteme wieder normal funktionieren. Unsere Station ist in Ordnung. Die Jungs machen einen guten Job. In Saratow an der Wolga kartet der Präsident nach. Alles also nur ein Hirngespinst. Nein, wieder einmal sind die Kosmonauten gerade noch davongekommen. Und auch dieser Zwischenfall ein Lehrstück russischer Informationspolitik, seit die Mir ins Trudeln geraten ist.
For a short time, the Mir crew had no way of generating oxygen. 2 of its oxygen systems broke down, leading the U.S. Space Agency, NASA, to call it a potentially serious situation. But by Tuesday morning, when Mission Control spoke by radio with the Mir, the crew reported the systems were back to normal. With the Mir's space station's troubles in the spotlight again, a frustrated deputy flight director lashed out at the media.
The press overreacts. This is a very minor technical problem, but the reports about it sound like a huge, tragic calamity, a life-threatening event. This is really wrong. We're sick and tired of explaining those things. You know, we are just doing our job, and I don't understand why it gets so distorted.
Even Russian President Boris Yeltsin chimed in from a business trip in southern Russia, confidently saying the Mir lives and will live. Mission Control officials said the main oxygen-generating system, called the Electron, located in the Quant module, has been acting up for several days, and Monday it shut down. The crew discovered it was an electrical contact problem. In the meantime, they tried to use the backup system that uses canisters, which they ignite to form oxygen, but they couldn't get them lighted. It turned out the firing pin became too dull after repeated use. They replaced it with an extra pin. And finally, there's some good news on the Mir space station. 3 out of 4 solar panels on the damaged Spectre module are now receiving power. And that was the whole idea behind the spacewalk last Friday. A welcome change after a tough night. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
Pannen an Bord der Raumstation Mir sind behoben. Energie- und Sauerstoffversorgung funktionieren wieder. Wladimir Solovjow, der Direktor der Flugleitzentrale, erklärte, alle Systeme arbeiteten wieder normal. Die Kosmonauten, die seit dem Raumunfall am 25. Juni überwiegend mit Reparieren beschäftigt sind, konnten heute 3 der 4 Solarkollektoren wieder auf die Sonne ausrichten. Der 4. soll bei einem der geplanten Weltraumspaziergänge wiederhergestellt werden.
An Bord der Mir ist alles in Ordnung, übermittelte der Kommandant der Raumstation heute der Bodenkontrolle in Koroljow bei Moskau. Auch das Sauerstoffsystem funktioniere gut, so Solovjow. Die Mannschaft hat damit begonnen, das seit mehr als 2 Monaten stillgelegte Kristallmodul zu reaktivieren. Bis Montag soll dann das Forschungslabor wieder mit Strom versorgt sein. Am 3. September wollen Solovjow und der Astronaut Foale mit den Reparaturen außerhalb der Mir beginnen.
Space Station Mir spent the day pumping up, getting ready for a physically challenging schedule that's ahead of them. Mission controllers have planned a series of tests for the crew in preparation for next Wednesday's scheduled spacewalk. NASA officials have not yet given permission for astronaut Michael Foale to take part in the trip outside the space station. It's to look for tiny holes in the hull of the Spectre module. Crew members are slowly restoring life to sections of the Russian space station that were damaged in a collision 2 months ago. Mission controllers monitored operations as the crew switched on the ventilation system in the Kristall module. The Kristall is one of 6 modules on Mir. It is needed for docking with the shuttles from the United States as well as numerous scientific tests.
Turn on the television in Russia and you can't help seeing President Boris Yeltsin. One day he's at a rocket factory praising the courage of Russian cosmonauts. Another day he's assuring Russians no one will be hurt by the new law on religious freedom. He even finds time to climb into the cockpit of a new Russian fighter jet.
With the recent problems on the Mir space station, do you think Mir should be abandoned or should work continue to fix it? 67% of NBC viewers responding think work should continue on Mir, while 33% think the space station should be abandoned.
It was the biggest accident in the 11-year history of the Mir space station, and Russian space officials say it was the cosmonauts' fault. The June 25th collision occurred as Mir commander Vasily Tsibliev and flight engineer Alexander Lazutkin were practice docking a Progress supply ship. The supply ship crashed into the Mir, cutting its power in half. Russian space officials launched an investigation. The report will be issued Thursday. In an interview with the Russian news agency Itar TASS, the Russian coordinator of the Mir NASA program said that report will blame the crew. Valery Rumin said the conclusion raises no doubts since it was based on interviews with the crew as well as computer data. The cosmonauts returned to Earth in mid-August. In a news conference, Commander Tsibliev lashed out at critics and said it's a long tradition in Russia to find a scapegoat. Rumin did not say how the cosmonauts will be disciplined, but added they may have to pay a fine. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
The Mir crew members were all smiles when they got to speak with their families from the space station's central core. But now, 2 of them, Mike Foale and Anatoly Soloviev, are all business. They're in the final stages of preparation for a spacewalk Friday night to find the leak that almost caused them to abandon ship. The leak was created by an out-of-control supply ship, which punctured the skin of the Spectre Science Laboratory. Mir Commander Soloviev has trained this summer in a water tank in Russia to make the repairs, and his job will be to cut insulation away and install handrails so he can come back later and fix the leak. For Mike Foale, the on-the-job training for this spacewalk came long ago, in February 1995. Foale and astronaut Bernard Harris ventured into the space shuttle's cargo bay to test the ability of a U.S. spacesuit to protect spacewalkers from the cold. Both astronauts got extremely cold, and their walk had to be cut short. Foale has spent a short time in the Russian water tank, but his bosses at NASA in Houston say the Russian system will have him ready by Friday.
You can have confidence in on-orbit training, refreshing people in the use of the suit. They can rehearse specific tasks and so on. And in some cases where they have the tools inside with them, they can become extremely proficient immediately prior to the actual EVA.
The main reason Foale is making the spacewalk rather than flight engineer Pavel Vinogradov is that Foale is coming back to Earth sooner. He'll be able to touch the skin of Mir and see the damage and report in person to Russian engineers and managers when he gets home in early October. The two cosmonauts will live on Mir for several more months. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
Für die neue Mannschaft an Bord der Raumstation Mir wird's morgen spannend. Dann soll der riskante Ausstieg ins All stattfinden. Der Amerikaner Foale und der Russe Solovjow wollen Sonnenkollektoren neu positionieren und das beschädigte Modul untersuchen. Es soll der erste von insgesamt 4 Weltraumspaziergängen werden. Rainer Munz über die Vorbereitungen für die gefährliche Mission.
Wieder und wieder überprüfte Kommandant Anatoly Solovjow in den vergangenen Tagen die Raumanzüge. Wenn sie nicht richtig sitzen, bedeutet das für die Kosmonauten Lebensgefahr. Morgen ganz früh, 5 Minuten vor 3 Uhr, wird aus dem Trockentraining ernst. Dann verlässt Solovjow zusammen mit dem Amerikaner Michael Foale die Raumstation. Für die Inspektion des beschädigten Spectre-Moduls sind 6 Stunden eingeplant. Maximal reichen die Sauerstoffvorräte der beiden Raumklempner für 7 Stunden. Von ihrer Ausstiegsstelle aus tastet sich das russisch-amerikanische Reparaturteam langsam zur beschädigten Stelle vor. Gesichert sind die beiden durch jeweils 2 Leinen. Am Spectre-Modul suchen sie dann die vermuteten Lecks. Mit einer solchen Schere kann Kommandant Solovjow dazu Teile der Außenhaut aufschneiden. Anders wird er vermutlich die kleinen Löcher nicht entdecken. Gefahr droht den Kosmonauten vor allem durch Metallteile, die durch den Crash verbogen wurden und hervorstehen und die Raumanzüge aufschlitzen können. In diesem Fall hätte der Kosmonaut kaum eine Überlebenschance. Außer der Suche nach den Lecks müssen Solovjow und Foale auch diese Abdichtung am Basisteil der Station anbringen. Mit den dicken, unbeweglichen Handschuhen ist dies eine extrem schwierige Aufgabe. Bleibt den beiden dann genug Zeit, sollen sie auch noch Solarzellen mit der Hand in die richtige Stellung zur Sonne drehen. Ein Mammutprogramm also für die 2 Kosmonauten, die während ihres Raumausflugs bis zu 5 Kilo abnehmen.
The first job for the crew was to attach themselves and their toolbox to a long pole connected to the center of the space station. They have already started to move that boom, as it is called, from one end of Mir, where the airlock is located, to the other end. They're about halfway down from one side of the Russian space station to the other. They'll probably be in place to begin looking for the leak in about the next 15 to 20 minutes. As yet, the Russian space station has been unable to downlink any live pictures as the spacewalk got underway. We're getting all our information from two-way radio conversations between astronaut Foale, cosmonaut Soloviev, and the ground. The Spectre module was punctured by a runaway Progress supply ship. Here's what it looked like back on June 25th. I've drawn an arrow to show you where the supply ship is supposed to dock with the Mir space station. And you can see from these pictures it is not lined up to do that at all. It is going in at a 90-degree angle from the docking location that it's supposed to hit. And as this video continues, you will see the crash as the Progress supply ship begins to do damage to the Russian space station. From these pictures, experts on the ground were able to determine that the space station was hit not once, but 7 times. That's the shoulder of the Mir commander. Now, you saw that crash when the vibration from the first or second hit came into the space station. There's 7 more times it was hit, and that's why they're having to do a spacewalk right now. Spacewalk is in progress till 8:12 minutes. It will continue, and our coverage will as well. John Holloman, CNN, reporting from Atlanta. We can tell you this. Astronaut Mike Foale and cosmonaut Anatoly Soloviev are now beginning to cut away insulation from the Spectre module at one of the far ends of the Mir space station. They started their spacewalk about 55 minutes ago at the other end of Mir. I'll draw on our sketch pad and show you. This is where Mir's airlock is located. This is where the astronaut and cosmonaut came out. They got on a boom, sort of a crane, which is not shown on this picture, and that crane moved them all the way around here and down to the end of the, well, let me start over. I've messed up. Anyway, they started here. They ended up down here at the Spectre module. That's the area where all the damage, or much of the damage, to the Mir space station has occurred. The airlock to the outside, as you can see, is at one end of the space station. The Cavant 2 module made their way down the space station using a controllable boom, which Foale operated with controls on one end. Commander Soloviev is doing most of the heavy lifting on the walk. He has a toolkit filled with various cutting tools that he's using to remove insulation and look for the leak. So far, we don't know if he's found it because Mir can only communicate with the ground for for about 40 minutes of each hour. We expect live pictures from Mir in about 40 minutes from now, and these were pictures taken showing the solar panels on the Spectre module before the spacewalk began. This is a fascinating picture, Relitza. It's a picture taken back on the 25th of June when all the damage to the Mir space station occurred. This is a TV monitor inside Mir looking at a TV camera located in the Progress supply ship. So you're looking at the supply ship as it looks at the space station. The supply ship was supposed to dock right down here, and as you can see, it is 90 degrees separated from where it is supposed to be for the docking. Just as it got to this point, it should have been stopped manually and backed up. It continued to move forward very, very rapidly. That was the first hit against the space station. In a minute, there you see another jarring blow that moved the TV set. All in all, the Progress supply ship hit the Mir space station 9 separate times and caused all the damage that the astronaut and cosmonaut are trying to find for sure and repair sometime over the next 6 hours.
And John, as we know, last month the astronauts and the cosmonaut also did a spacewalk. What did that help them learn about what they're going to encounter right now?
Well, Relitza, the thing is, what they did in that spacewalk was got very familiar with the spacesuits, and they discovered that they couldn't find the leak inside the Spectre module by going inside it, which necessitated the spacewalk tonight. They're going to have to go outside, and the Spectre is covered with thick panels of insulation. It's sort of like this foam stuff that sometimes you spray around mouse holes and things like that in your house, and it's about this thick all around the Spectre. They have cutting tools that they're going to use to cut through that insulation and get down to see if they can see an actual hole, which they can repair sometime later.
John Holloman, thank you.
2 men are making an important walk. We'll plan to bring you a live update right after this.
Okay, great. Good job, Pavel.
This close-up view of Mir 24 Commander Anatoly Soloviev wearing the spacesuit
Floating
with the red
outside the
stripes.
Russian space station Mir.
See what's going on.
The two have been on the spacewalk for about 3 hours, studying the outside of the damaged craft. They're looking for holes punched in Mir back in June, when an unmanned supply ship collided with the station. And joining us now with the latest on that mission is CNN space correspondent John Holloman. John?
Martina, Mir Commander Anatoly Soloviev has been cutting away at insulation outside Mir's Spectre module for the past hour, looking for a leak in the skin of the Spectre. While he cuts away, astronaut Mike Foale, who's also outside, is operating as cameraman, making videotape of the spacewalk, which will be replayed for ground managers sometime later this week. Commander Soloviev has been talking to the ground for the past half hour. He's told ground managers some of the support struts on the damaged solar panel are bent and broken, indicating that it took a difficult hit when the Progress supply ship went out of control and bashed the Mir station 7 different times. Soloviev has not indicated he's found a puncture in the skin of Spectre yet, and he's told the ground that it may be difficult to find a leak if it is located where the damaged solar panel connects with Spectre's outer shell. The outer skin of the Russian station is very thin, about the thickness of sheet metal. Joining us to talk about the spacewalk and how it's going are Dr. Norm Thagard, the first American to live on Mir. He's with us at CNN Center. And on the phone from Mission Control in Moscow, the most recent Mir resident, astronaut Jerry Lininger. Thank you both for joining us. Norm, you've been monitoring the spacewalk for the last 3 hours that it's been underway. What do you make of how it's going? Does the crew, I mean, you know these men, you speak excellent Russian, you've been hearing them talk to the ground in Russian. How do they sound to you?
They sound like they're conducting a normal sort of operation, and it's very painstaking. The director is there, the experts in the control center are directing them to specific numbered panels. And while he is finding damaged and broken struts, he reports that the skin around that appears to be undamaged.
How big a problem is that for them? I mean, the main purpose of this mission is to find the leak. They've been out a couple hours, they haven't found it.
In an ideal world, they'd find the leak right away. It would be one easily repairable, but that's ideal. I'm not sure they even expected to do that, but this is one of those things you got to go do. You got to try it.
Yeah, I guess they have about another hour that they can look for leaks, and the Mir was hit 7 different times, we are told. The next most likely candidate after the area of this radiator, which we can see that on the right of your screen, the bent radiator. Commander Soloviev is now outside in his spacesuit. He's got a cutting tool in his hand, and he has been using that tool, as I say, for the past hour to cut away insulation and look at support beams that hold that radiator away from the wafer-thin side of the Mir space station itself. If they don't find it, what do they then do?
Well, if they don't find it, you can always go back and try again. I'm sure what will happen is they'll assess, they and the mission controllers, after the walk is complete, and look for other likely areas and perhaps look at those in a future spacewalk.
Yeah, Jerry Leninger, join us from Moscow, and Norm, you can jump in while Jerry is talking to our viewers as well. I know, Jerry, you did a spacewalk outside on this boom outside the Mir station. What was that like? It's very different from doing a spacewalk on the shuttle, isn't it?
That's correct. It's the boom, the Strela arm is actually very flimsy, and you're not real stable, and you can see Soloviev kind of moving around, so getting stable is one of his main difficulties right now.
Yeah. Does it beat you up physically to go outside the Russian space station? I mean, when you came back in, were you really whipped?
You know, physically I felt really good when I came back in. I think after 4 months in space I was moving very gracefully, and so physically I really did not have a problem.
Yeah. We are still waiting for more pictures from Mission Control. What's the atmosphere in the room where you are? You've seen the controllers talking to Mir, and we've heard some of the communication, but what does it look like in there? Is everything calm?
I think it's very calm. People are pretty much on the edge of their seats, though, when we get into comm passes and looking at the work they're doing, and seem very pleased so far.
Yep. What's your guess? Are they going to find this leak in this spacewalk?
You know, I think part of the task there is to get to those struts so that they can hook in some other longer pipes that they, in the future, can use to hook onto and to get more stable and work in that area. So I think their main task is just to uncover those struts and get them exposed, and while they're at it, take a look around. But looking for the hole is probably the secondary factor right now.
Yep, they've been outside for 3 hours. As I understand it, the spacesuits run out of air after about 7 hours. Is that, so they've got another 4 hours maximum to do the other tasks ahead of them. Have you heard any word in Mission Control about them being assigned to go to the next task?
Not yet. They're still working at the first zone. Once they get back to Kvan 2, taking the dosimeter out, the bent dosimeter is a real quick procedure, so that shouldn't take any time. And over at base block, it's probably going to take a little bit to go ahead and cover up the Vozdukh system.
Yeah, so they still have a little time they can continue to do what they're doing in the area of this radiator, which was really seriously damaged, and you can see that from these pictures we're looking at now. All right, Jerry Leninger, thank you for joining us from Moscow. We'll stay in touch with you if you have time. I know you're there on a mission today. Norm, Jerry got celebrated by the Russian people with his 2 cosmonaut buddies from the last Mir crew. They walked through downtown to the Gagarin statue, and we saw that on television a little while ago. Tell me, to you, in your mind, what is the danger factor of going outside the Russian station?
The danger factor is, and it's not a great danger, but I guess twofold. You could inadvertently fail to hook yourself up and wind up floating into space, but they train very well not to do that, and I guess their rule is to always have 2 tethers attached at any one time and a rip in the suit. And since the module was damaged, you have to worry about that more than you normally would, so they'll have to be careful.
Yeah, all right. Norm Thaggart, Jerry Leninger, thank you both for joining us here on CNN International. Bettina, it continues, and our coverage will too.
Thank you very much, John. We're looking forward to that, and we'll have more news in a moment. Stay with us. U.S. astronaut Michael Foale and cosmonaut Anatoly Soloviev are now floating outside the Mir space station. They're trying to find punctures in Mir's Spectre module. That's the module that was damaged in a collision with a supply ship earlier this year. CNN's John Holliman joins us now to give us the latest on the spacewalk. John?
Bettina, we've got 3 things to report to you. First, the good news is the astronaut and cosmonaut are not in any jeopardy. They haven't ripped their spacesuits. It's a very dangerous thing to work outside the Russian space station, but they're okay. The bad news is the main thing they wanted to do on this trip, which was to find the leak in the Spectre module, they haven't been able to do yet. We have some pictures, the only pictures that we have to show you of this spacewalk are some pictures that were fed down live to the Earth about an hour and a half ago now. And they show what's going on, or at least what was going on at that time. Mir Commander Anatoly Soloviev using a special cutting tool, which you see in his hand there. This is the cutting tool. And the radiator, which was the most visibly damaged piece of the Mir space station, the Spectre module, is right there. That's the dent in the side of it made when the Progress supply ship just bashed into it as it went out of control back on the 25th day of June. Commander Soloviev continuing to move back and forth out there, getting insulation out of the way. He has revealed the support struts that hold the radiator to the Spectre module, and it was hoped by people on the ground that they were going to find a leak about the size of a postage stamp where one of those struts had been pushed through the outer skin of Mir. Joining us, first American to live on Mir, Dr. Norm Taggart. Norm, how thick is the skin on the Russian space station?
Well, it's just sheet metal, basically, and I think it's made out of aluminum, so it has to be somewhat thin, otherwise the weight would be so much you could never get it up there in the first place.
Yeah, so it's going to be very difficult to find this leak if it is somewhere in the Spectre and the whole thing is covered with insulation, correct?
You have to move a lot of insulation around, and that's the tool that Anatoly had that he was working with that we saw on the screen.
Yep, earlier we saw Michael Foale using a tool in practice that looked like a pair of hedge clippers, big things like this that were working out there. Don't know whether Soloviev is using those or not. Is it significant that we don't have more picture?
No, I think that this is the normal amount of pictures we would expect. As you know, they sometimes use the satellite, sometimes they don't. They've used it a lot tonight, and we have gotten some good pictures anyway.
Yeah, you've been listening to the Russian of the cosmonauts speaking to ground controllers. How do they seem to you?
They seem very professional, very methodical. Everybody's calm. Occasionally they joke with one another, so I think things are going fairly well.
Soloviev was telling a joke just before we came in here to go on television, right, about moving around.
That was Soloviev, who is the flight director, and he apologized for making him go tuda-shuda, which means here and there. So.
Yeah. So anyway, they're trying at this point, I guess, to conserve their strength. They've been out 3.5 hours. The spacesuits are heavy and affect various parts of their body in different ways. Right?
And in fact, he told them a couple times to rest. So apparently they want to work more than the controllers and directors would like them to work at times.
Yep. Now, tell me this. The 7-hour air supply for the spacesuit, that's not something that comes out on a pipe from inside. That's out there with them, right?
It's in their backpack, and it's bottled oxygen, and when that runs out, it runs out.
Yep. And is it absolutely 7 hours? I mean, if they wanted to stay out 7 hours and 20 minutes, would there be a way to look at a meter and say, yeah, we've got a little more time like a diver would?
Their oxygen quantity is monitored, and how much you have really depends on your workload. If you went out there and just rested, you probably got considerably more than 7 hours.
Yeah. Well, this spacewalk, how would you rate it at this point?
Well, I would rate it as kind of a normal spacewalk. It actually isn't as involved in some ways as the one our crew did when they moved a solar array.
Yeah, okay. If the leak happens to be at the point where the solar array is connected to the side of Spectre, that's going to be much more difficult to fix, I would imagine.
Oh, it really depends. I mean, it might be fairly easy if it's a well-circumscribed area.
Yeah. All right, so they've got another roughly 3 hours of air left. We've got these pictures, as I say, the only pictures we have seen showing cosmonaut Soloviev at work out there. We're hoping to get more downlinked by cosmonaut Pavel Vinogradov, who has got a fairly large television camera, almost as big as the ones we have here at CNN, that he's pointing to a very tiny porthole. And I guess there are a lot of portholes around the Mir station where he can look out and see these guys at work.
A lot of portholes, and it would be real interesting if we could see how he has that camera mounted. When I mounted that camera during the spacewalks, I had it on little goosenecks with rubber bands basically holding it in place.
Well, that may be what is happening or not happening up there now. We'll be back. Bettina and Riz will keep you posted on this as we continue to watch. And so far, nobody's in big danger, but the main mission of this still hadn't been accomplished.
And the cosmonaut and the U.S. astronaut Michael Foale have been outside of Mir for 4 hours now. They've been going over, in a very painstaking process, going over the exterior of the damaged Spectre module, really inch by inch, looking for the exact spot where the hole was punched in that module in an accident back in June. Now, some video was fed down from Mir a short while ago. In this video, we can see the Russian cosmonaut Anatoly Solovyov in a fairly close-up view, looking at the exterior of the Spectre module. He is also cutting away some of the insulation material that covers the Spectre module, again looking for that crack. Unfortunately, up until now, they've not found any holes. That is the main priority of this spacewalk, which is expected to last about another 2 hours. Michael Foale and Anatoly Solovyov have a number of other tasks to perform. Among them, they are going to try to adjust Mir's solar panels to a better position to catch the energy from the sun's rays. So again, the search for the hole in Mir continues. So far, none has been found. The cosmonaut and U.S. astronaut Michael Foale working very painstakingly, inch by inch, going over the whole surface of the damaged module, trying to find that puncture. Anne.
Rob, can you tell us whether much of the dangerous part of the mission is behind them or ahead of them?
I think that the danger is more or less of a constant, and I was just speaking to Jerry Lininger, who is the U.S. astronaut who went in a spacewalk outside Mir not long ago, back in the springtime. He said that it is a question of fatigue, holding on to the exterior of the module, making sure that you don't get cut loose, that you're attached at all times. And he said also that it's really a feeling of almost like falling off a cliff at 18,000 miles per hour constantly. So it's a very unique experience for these space crew members right now. Anne.
All right. CNN space correspondent John Holliman brings us the latest information. John?
Well, Bettina, we have a couple of pictures to show you that'll illustrate what seems to be the most likely candidate found by the spacewalkers for the leak in Mir's Spectre module. I'll go to our illustrations scene here. First of all, you can see this is the tool that cosmonaut Soloviev, the commander of Mir, Anatoly Soloviev, one of the many tools he has been using to cut away insulation on the outside of the Russian space station. The tool was being demonstrated here a couple of days ago before the outside spacewalk by Mike Foale. He and Soloviev were practicing at this point. And now you can see Soloviev outside using a different cutting tool to cut away insulation on, in an area around one of Mir's radiator panels. This is the radiator panel, and it's supposed to be straight down like this rather than dented as it is in this picture. This was the first area, the primary area the spacewalkers were sent out to investigate as the source of the leak. They found no sign of a leak there. Then they went up to the end of the Spectre module. There are 4 solar panels that are located there, including one of them which was badly damaged in the same collision. Now, in this picture, you can see some of the damage to the solar array here, here. There's more damage out here. But the area where they believe they might have found an area of the leak is this area right here, where the solar panel attaches to the rest of the Mir space station. And if that is the source of the leak, it could potentially be a difficult leak to fix. The next shuttle that goes up to the Mir has some equipment which might be helpful in repairing a leak in that area. Where the what is going on now, we are told, is that Soloviev is now out either here or here. We're not exactly sure which of these spots he is located. Jill Doherty joins us on the phone from Moscow. He's out at the very tip end of the Spectre module, attempting to adjust one of the 2 solar panels there so that it gets a better shot at the sun. Jill, you've been listening and monitoring Russian mission control. They still seem to be fairly cool as cucumbers as they go through this exercise.
Well, they are. You know, John, this one seems to be a lot more deliberate than the last one. You know, the internal spacewalk, the last time, they were really kind of on a fishing expedition trying to see what they would find out. It appears to be much more organized, although there is a bit of making it up as they go along. After all, when they couldn't find the hole initially, they had to keep moving on to greener pastures. But it does seem a bit more controlled and a little bit more deliberate. And also that factor that they want to go slowly, make sure that they don't rip their suits, that they know exactly, putting one foot in front of the other, so to speak.
Yeah, astronaut Norm Thagard is joining us. Jill, Norm, I know you've been on the phone to Mission Control in Moscow talking to people there. They are not sure they found the leak, right?
That's right. What they reported is that array, the base of the array is flush on one side, but there's a gap on the other side. Probably the best way to characterize it is that's a suspicious area.
Yeah, and is there anything else they can do on this spacewalk to make a more affirmative determination, or will it have to wait till later?
I think it's going to wait till later because the last thing we heard is they're on that array on the opposite side, and Anatoly Solovyev's getting himself in a position to orient that array for best sun pointing.
Yeah, all right. So once they get that done, they have a couple of other jobs to accomplish as well. They have to put in a vent plug, it's the best way I can describe it, so that they'll be able to put in a new carbon dioxide removal system. The one that they have, it's called a Vozduk system, I believe, has worked off and on. I guess it's good to have redundancy wherever you can have it on Mir.
It is, and that Vozduk system's been up there since about 1987, and Vozduk, by the way, in Russian means air.
So it's very important to have a spare air cleaner. Norm, you've been on Mir. Were the problems that occurred while you were there anything like as serious as the problems that have occurred over the past 6 months?
I really don't think so. What we had were routine maintenance problems. We replaced air conditioning units. We did have some problems from time to time, mostly with power and power downs and that sort of thing.
Yeah. All right. What we'd like to do now is bring our viewers up to date on what has happened so far on the Mir space station in this spacewalk tonight. I think we'll have a picture to show you in just a minute. Here's an artist's conception of the Mir space station. The airlock where the astronaut and cosmonaut left the Mir is up here. They attach themselves to a boom which is sort of anchored here. And they got on that boom, and then it rotated them all the way down here to the Spectre module. The places where they've been doing the work are this radiator panel here, the one that was damaged, and this solar panel out here, also the solar panel that was damaged. And the area of most concern to them is the cause of the leak is right there, where this solar panel connects to the main body of the Spectre space station. Again, you can see it right there on this drawing. So they're going to be out for another hour, maybe hour and a half, and we'll continue to keep up with their progress and let you know. Bettina?
Thank you very much, John. And that's our report for now. I'm Bettina Lucia at the CNN Center in Atlanta.
And I'm Riz Khan. We'll be back in just a few more minutes with more on the preparations for Princess Diana's funeral.
After 5 hours, the cosmonaut Anatoly Solovyov and U.S. astronaut Michael Foale should be back inside Mir within the hour. Ann.
All right, Rob Reynolds, thank you so much for that report.
Here, let me get this out of the way so you can see it a little bit better. Right here inside this box is the connecting point. And what he did was took a tool, very much like the tool you'd use to test a spark plug for a gap. And there's a circular connector there, which you can see, and it's supposed to be a uniform gap all the way around the connector. There's supposed to be this gap all the way around the circle, but when they put the tool in there to test it, they found it was not uniform. Joining us is Mir's first American resident, Norm Thagard. Norm, they still can't conclusively say that's the area of the leak, right?
That's right, and that's exactly what they're saying, that it is a suspicious area, and certainly the directors and controllers will look at that and try and decide what to do next.
All right, Norm, and you were able to listen to some more of the NASA commentary than I was able to hear. Any indication that they're going to be out there 2 more hours, or does it look like they're being told to come back in right away?
They didn't comment. They were just recapping what you had already talked about.
Yeah, all right. So, Bettina, Riz, we'll keep you posted on this. Spacewalk could be ending within the next hour, could last a little longer than that.
Glückwünsche zum 850-jährigen Stadtjubiläum von Moskau
waren für die Mir-Besatzung Ehrensache. Weniger Anlass zur Freude gab allerdings ihr 6-stündiger Außeneinsatz im All. Kommandant Solovjow und sein amerikanischer Kollege Foale versuchten vergeblich, das im Juni leckgeschlagene Spectre-Modul zu reparieren. Es gelang ihnen nur, 2 von 3 Sonnensegeln der Mir in ihre alte Position zu bringen. Damit bleibt die Stromversorgung der Station stark eingeschränkt.
A 6-hour walk in space, the crew of the Russian space station Mir may have found the source of their problems. The mission was in part to locate an air leak caused by a collision in June. CNN's John Holloman reports.
Mir commander Anatoly Soloviev hard at work cutting away insulation from the Spectre module outside the Mir space station. After 6 hours outside, Soloviev and astronaut Mike Foale, who was taking pictures of the damage, believed they might have found the source of the leak which depressurized Mir back on June 25th, the spot where the broken solar panel connects to Mir.
There is some potential that that could be one of the likely candidates that still hasn't been closed out.
It will take a closer look at Foale's pictures and more conversation with Soloviev to know for sure that the leak is here, where the damaged solar panel connects to the rest of Mir. And if this is the leak point, it's going to be very tough to fix.
Then you have to somehow manhandle that solar array and either jettison it or strap it down in some fashion. It's a large, ungainly piece of hardware with a lot of sharp edges.
There are 2 other possible places where the leak could be, which the cosmonaut and astronaut weren't able to get to. As the astronauts were preparing to go outside, we got pictures of the accident itself. These are pictures that were made on the 25th of June, and what you see on that TV monitor, which is located on the Mir space station, is a picture of the Mir space station seen by the Progress supply ship.
Right. It looks, excuse me, John, it looks like we're closing in on it, and at this point we shouldn't have any closing rate at all. We should be staying out there at some distance away from the station, and yet Progress is moving toward the station.
Right. That's the docking port way down there, and we ought to be looking at that docking port if this were a normal docking. Is that correct?
That's right.
There's the first hit, and you see the then Mir commander getting jostled, and there's another hit as the TV monitor itself was jerked around. So that's what caused this problem. Even though a spacewalk is serious business, Commander Soloviev had time to celebrate the 850th birthday of Moscow with a huge birthday card from space. The next Mir spacewalk scheduled after the shuttle arrives, and that's going to happen at the end of this month. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
Die Besatzungsmitglieder der Raumstation Mir konnten bei ihrem 6-stündigen Weltraumspaziergang die Station nicht vollständig reparieren. Anatoly Solovjow und der Amerikaner Michael Foale konnten 2 der 3 beschädigten Sonnenkollektoren neu ausrichten, sodass die Stromversorgung erheblich verbessert wurde. Allerdings fanden die beiden noch nicht das Leck in der Außenhülle des Forschungsmoduls Spectre. Während des Ausflugs beglückwünschte Solovjow Moskau mit einer Fahne zur 850-Jahr-Feier.
Es war der bislang schwierigste und auch gefährlichste Einsatz, den die Kosmonauten dieser Mir-Mission zu bestehen hatten. 3 Uhr nachts durch eine schmale Luke verlassen Kommandant Solovjow und der Amerikaner Foale die Station. Das Leck an der Außenhülle des Spectre-Moduls sollen sie aufspüren. Ein Albtraumjob. Mit über 3000 Kilometern pro Stunde rast die Station durchs All. Nur eine falsche Bewegung, nur eine Sekunde ohne Kontakt zur Station und die Kosmonauten treiben ab in die Unendlichkeit. Über 2 Zentner wiegt der klobige Raumanzug, Schwerelosigkeit, Flüssigkeitsverlust, bis an die Grenzen ihrer Belastbarkeit für die Kosmonauten solch ein Spaziergang. Die zerfetzte Außenhülle des Spectre-Moduls. 18 Minuten bleiben euch noch, warnt die Bodenkontrollstation. Auch nach 6 Stunden quälender Suche, die Lecks blieben unentdeckt.
Was die Kosmonauten tun konnten, haben sie getan. Dass sie die Löcher nicht entdeckten, keine Katastrophe. Schon seit längerem erörtern russische Spezialisten, dass die Außenhaut der Station nicht mehr zu reparieren ist. Doch Spectre, ein reines Forschungsmodul, das allerschlimmstenfalls auch aufgegeben werden kann.
Kurz vor ihrer Rückkehr in die Station ein Gruß runter zur Erde. Sprasnikam Moskwa, herzlichen Glückwunsch Moskau. Die russische Hauptstadt feiert an diesem Wochenende ihr 850-jähriges Jubiläum.
Welcome back to World News.
Crew members of the Russian space station Mir are expected to try to generate more power on Sunday by turning a pair of solar panels towards the sun. If the maneuver works, it will be because of this spacewalk. The crew spent several hours late Friday and early Saturday wrestling the panels into position. They were knocked offline in a collision with an unmanned cargo ship in June. The impact cut Mir's power in half.
For the third time this summer, the computer on board the Mir space station has shut down. But Russian officials insist the crew is in no danger. As always, CNN's John Holloman is on this story. He joins us from Atlanta. John, how serious is it?
Well, I don't know, Sonia. It just never goes away on Mir. You can't go 4 or 5 days without having another problem to talk about. For the past 15 hours, the Mir space station has been somewhat out of control. The master computer on board, you can see it coming into view in the center of your screen in a minute here, after warning the crew it was going to fail, shut itself off. The crew attempted to restart the computer but couldn't get it running again. In the aftermath of that, they had to shut down most of the electrical equipment on board, but now most of the electrical stuff is back in operation. What does it feel like to be in a space station that's drifting through space without a steering system? Jerry Leninger knows because he was on Mir until 4 months ago when Mike Foale replaced him.
It's not frightening in any way. You're not being slammed against walls or anything of that nature. It's a very slow sort of tumble. If you look out the window, you notice that the Earth is moving out of your view very rapidly, and so it's not a normal situation. But as long as you can recover the computer, spin your gyrodynes, these big tops basically that help keep you stable in space, and do those sorts of things, you can get back to normal relatively quickly within 2 or 3 days usually.
Mission managers have told the cosmonauts and astronaut Foale to go to bed while the ground-based technicians figure out which of the master computer's systems caused the failure. They anticipate they'll have the space station back to something like more normal shortly after the astronauts wake up in the morning. Sonia?
Well, John, that may be fixable, but there's also the question of the holes in the Spectre module, and in the spacewalk at the weekend, they weren't able to find where they were.
Yeah, that was a problem, Sonia. What they did, because of time limitations, you can only be outside in space in the Russian suit for about 7 hours. They spent about the first 2 hours looking for the leaks. And you can see the commander right now out there over my shoulder as he pulled away insulation from the radiator on the Spectre module. You can see the big dent in the radiator there on the right side of your screen. They figured that had to be where the hole was. Well, it wasn't there. So then they went out to where the solar panels connect to the Spectre module. They might have found the leak and not known it. The place where the damaged solar panel connects to the space station, it certainly has a gap in it, but they couldn't see and they couldn't feel with these thick spacesuit gloves on whether there was an actual crack in the skin of the space station there. They took some photographs, and those photographs will be examined closely on the ground as soon as they can get transmitted back down here. And if that's where the leak is, it's going to be very difficult to fix. There are a couple more possible candidate leak sites way on the other side of Spectre. So the next time they go out for a spacewalk, if they haven't found it on this side, they'll check over there.
Yes, there are more problems aboard the aging Russian space station Mir. Monday, its main computer system failed. That is the 3rd time since July. Another breakdown to add to a long list. Back in February, a fire knocked out several systems, including the oxygen generators. This past June, the biggest space collision ever when an unmanned cargo ship crashed into Mir. The 3-man crew worked in the dark to return power. In July, a disconnected cable knocked out power again. The main computer failed in mid-August, and the oxygen generators failed a week later. Well, now, without the main computer, the crew cannot use the primary steering system, which is needed to keep Mir's solar panels turned toward the sun to produce power. But Russian space officials plan to solve the problem within 24 hours. Betsy Aaron reports from Moscow.
The situation on board Mir is normal. That's the word from Mission Control following the shutdown of the spacecraft's computer. Is anything normal about operations on Mir? As problems and challenges continue to mount, this is the reaction from Russian Mission Control.
Of course, we learn all the time. This is invaluable experience. We will restore, or at least try to restore, the station's orientation tomorrow.
When Mir's computer malfunctions, it sends out an alarm and shuts itself down. That's what happens when there is a problem.
It means, first of all, that it's very old hardware. You know, the station itself is already 11 years old, and the Soviet and Russian electronic hardware, like chips, like computer, never were known for their special reliability.
But now most of the systems which were shut off are working again. Those systems include the electron oxygen generating system. They've got lights, working conditions much improved. The good news for Mir, if there is any good news, is that during the latest spacewalk over the weekend, cosmonaut Anatoly Solovyov and astronaut Michael Foale were able to reset solar panels towards the sun. Mir now able to generate more much-needed power. This latest problem is being described as a defect in one of the computer units. As soon as the faulty unit is found, it will be replaced, we're told. They've got quite a repair shop up there. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Moscow.
For more information on the Russian space station, check out a special site offered by CNN Interactive, Repairing Mir. You can find this site at cnn.com/Mir.
Erleichterung im Moskauer Kontrollzentrum. Der Hauptcomputer der Raumstation Mir funktioniert wieder. Die russisch-amerikanische Besatzung hat das defekte Bauteil des Rechners ausgetauscht und neue Software installiert. Damit sind auch die Probleme bei der Stromerzeugung beseitigt. Der Computerausfall war der dritte seit Juli.